I'd like to call the order of the Milan Area Schools Board of Education regular meeting for Tuesday, May 21st, 2024. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Thank you for everyone attending this evening, and to those who will be watching the recording online. Just a few housekeeping things. All board members are present except for Ms. Heike. She is excused. Ms. Murray is serving as secretary this evening. Also, student member Avery Powell is not here at this time. Just before we start, we usually have recognition here, and I haven't been able to put a formal one in here, but I would like to recognize Molly Jepson for her award. Very well received and quite an honor for you and all that you do for Milan Area Schools. So I want to recognize your efforts. Thank you, Ms. Jepson. All right. First, we start with communications and community engagement. A reminder, this meeting is a meeting of the Board of Education in public for the purpose of conducting the school district's business. It is not to be considered a public meeting. There are 2 times for public participation during the meeting as indicated in the agenda. When addressing the board, you will be asked to state your name. The board determines the amount of time granted to individuals or groups to speak. Each person shall be allowed to speak for up to 3 minutes. Board members may question speakers but are not obligated to answer questions or make statements or commitments in response to issues raised by the public. In general, such items will be referred to the superintendent for advisement, investigation, study, and/or recommendation, or designated as future agenda items for board consideration. Are there any students who'd like to address the board? Are there any public members who'd like to address the board? All right, hearing none. We'll move on to routine matters for approval. I need a motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of May 8th, 2024.
Moved by Farrow.
Support by Gutierrez.
It's been moved and supported to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of May 8th, 2024. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, it's been moved and supported to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of May 8th, 2024. Ms. Murray?
Sislo.
Yes.
Farrow.
Yes.
Gutierrez.
Yes.
Okay, Murray, yes. Pryor.
Yes.
Rosenleacher.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries 6-0.
All right, next up, I need a motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting closed session of May 8th, 2024. Mr. McMahon is passing those out for us to review.
Sorry. You had a sign on here. So
Yep.
just what everything said.
So just take a minute to review these. Are there any questions or concerns regarding the closed minutes? All right, it's been moved and supported to approve the minutes of the regular meeting closed session of May 8th, 2024. Ms. Murray?
Was it moved? It was not moved and supported.
Oh, it was not moved. I apologize. Thank you.
Moved by Gutierrez.
Okay. Yep. Thank you for keeping me in line. I apologize.
Support by Pryor.
All right, it's been moved and supported. Moved by Gutierrez, supported by Pryor, to approve the minutes of the regular meeting closed session of May 8th, 2024. Are there any concerns in regards to the minutes, the closed minutes? All right. Now it has been moved and supported to approve the minutes of the regular meeting closed session of May 8th, 2024. Ms. Murray?
Okay, here we go. Farrow.
Yes.
Gutierrez.
Yes.
Absent Murray, yes. Pryor.
Yes.
Rosenleacher.
Yes.
Sislo.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries 6-0.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, next up in the strategic plan business in the area of finance and operations, I need a motion to adopt the resolution of the 2024-2025 WISD budget as included in attachment A1.
Moved by Farrow.
Support by Gutierrez.
So I just want to make sure this is a motion to adopt the resolution in support of the 2024-2025 WISD budget as included in attachment A. Is that correct? All right. This would be the second reading of that budget. We did have the first reading at the last meeting. We had the opportunity to present any questions or concerns that we had to the WISD or to Krista or Mr. Gearbaugh in regards to that budget. Are there any other questions or concerns regarding the 2024-25 WISD budget? All right. It has been moved and supported to adopt the resolution in support of the 2024-2025 WISD budget as included in attachment A1. Ms. Murray.
Gutierrez.
Yes.
Murray, yes. Pryor.
Yes.
Rosenleecher.
Yes.
Sislo.
Yes.
Farrow.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries 6-0.
All right, now is on to our general fund, or in our budget amendments for this fiscal year. Mr. Gearbaugh is handing those out. So again, these are the first reading of these budgets, of the amendments, and eventually we will get to the preliminary budget. So right now we'll be considering the 2023-2024 general fund budget amendment. Again, this is a first reading. Mr. Gearbaugh and Ms. Hendricks will go through this budget in attachment B. We'll have opportunity to ask questions and discuss. I know as they go through this, they'll also be talking about how they'll continue to review this. So potentially there may be some changes as they review this before we come to vote on it again, but they will definitely make us aware of any changes. So with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Hendricks.
If we look at Okay, if we look at attachment B, that is the general fund budget amendment for this year. If you'll notice, the first column is the amended budget. That is the budget that, as a board, you approved this past February. With this amendment, I am proposing an increase to revenues of $1.7 million, an increase to expenditures of $1.5 million. So a net increase to our fund balance of $177,746. That would bring us up to a 9.84% ending fund balance. The unassigned fund balance would be 7.15. If you look at the second page of attachment B, I have given a brief description of what some of the changes are. You will see that there was an increase of both revenues and expenditures of $1,114,000, and those were for grants. Whatever money comes in on a grant, the same amount of money goes back out on a grant. So there's always a zero net effect to the overall budget. There were changes made to the MIPSR's UAAL contributions. That was an increase of $198,000. We are in the process of putting up an FFA barn, if you guys didn't know about it already. I am budgeting for $75,000 in revenue. That's a $50,000 grant, and then $25,000 from the FFA program itself. So there should be a net zero effect on our budget for the barn. The enrollment stabilization 29.7 funds from the state, which is part of our state aid payments, decreased by $11,000. We had changes in the state aid foundation of $224,000. There were changes to our property tax based on changes in taxable values of a decrease of $74,000. For the first time since I've worked here, we have more than $2,000 in interest, so I increased it to $148,000. Or increased it by $148,000 to $150,000, and there were some miscellaneous revenue adjustments to bring the net change to $1,715,000. The expenses, you will see again the $1.1 million in grants. In evaluating our utilities, gas, water, and electric. I increased the budget by 76,000 based on actual usage to date. We had a number of buildings and grounds expenses, and I see a typo. It is not a high five chul, it's a high school. So I apologize for that. Elevator. But I listed a number of larger ticket items. Our fuel purchases for our buses are higher than what we had originally budgeted. We provide taxi service for students that are covered under the McKinney-Vento homeless grant, and our taxi charges are substantially higher this year. We have a contracted psychologist who we were hoping to cover completely through the IDEA flow-through grant, and that is not going to happen. So out of the general fund, I'm going to have to take about $32,000. Couple other items, CTE director, copier lease increases, but a total net change, or a total change in expenditures of $1,537,000. With those two changes, we went from a fund balance of $4,973,000 to what we're going to assume our ending fund balance to be $3,484,000 or $85,000. Does anybody have any questions on the general fund budget?
Ms. Hendricks,
Yes,
Sure.
Mr. Farrow.
good evening.
Hello.
A couple comments, not really a question. I just want to confirm that the state aid foundation change is an estimate of $221 per pupil, an increase of $221 per pupil?
No, this state aid foundation change is not based on
Okay.
the numbers that you two gentlemen provided me. We'll
Gotcha,
get to that
gotcha.
in the next one.
Okay,
This is the
Gotcha.
current year, so it's
my mistake.
changes due to or taxable value. Our state aid piece goes up if our taxable value goes down,
Okay.
because the state makes up part of that. So those are the types of changes you will see in that figure.
Thank you.
Ms. Hendricks, you mentioned above that the FFA barn grant was going to be net zero, so I don't see the $75,000 expense. Is that
Um,
already existing on the budget?
50,000 was in the last amendment,
Okay.
and the 25 is going to be part of that 58. That 58 is the miscellaneous adjustment. It's a number of line items.
So we don't need to expect that there will be another
No, it's already,
75,000?
it
It's
is
already in there?
built into that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes,
Ms. Hendricks?
yes.
Obviously, if you can't, maybe Mr. Gearback can. I'm just curious about the context behind the psychologist cost not being covered by the flow-through grant. That seems unusual.
It's honestly, it's not that, we are using our full flow through allocation. I was hoping carryover would have made up for the balance. But when all was said and done with our final allocation and our carryover, we didn't have enough to cover everything.
I see. So it wasn't that IDEA denied.
No,
Or
no,
refused to-
there is
okay.
a large piece of that
Right.
individual in our IDEA grant.
Mhm.
It's just, given the limited amount of funding and
Right.
the other expenditures that go in there, I didn't have enough to
I
cover
got
all
you.
of it.
Okay, so we're making up a difference, basically.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Yep.
And I assume the middle school lockers are for the movement of grades.
Yes. If there are no other questions on attachment B, we can move on to attachment C.
Yeah, just one quick thing. So I just want to verify that. So you're saying that we're going to have a total ending fund balance of 9.84%. That's what we're projecting.
That is what I'm projecting at this
Okay.
time. Yes.
And just so everyone is aware that the board does have a stated goal of being at 10%. So that does fall below the stated board goal of 10%. Yeah, so number 3 is any other questions on the amendment? All right, so we'll move on to the 2023-2024 debt funds budget amendment, which is attachment C. Ms. Hendricks?
Okay, attachment C consists of 3 pages. The first page is a summary of the 2 pages behind it. The first page gives you our total debt fund budget. The 2 behind it, the first one represents our 2018 debt fund, and the second one is our 2019 debt fund. Basically, we take the tax money in, and 2 times a year I make payments to the banks that hold our bonds. The debt service expenses going out are the actual expenses. The monies coming in represent what I believe our taxable values are going to generate for our debt funds. Any questions?
Just a couple of quick points to add to that. Remember that we not only pay our bond debt back, but we also are working on paying the school bond loan fund back. About a year ago, we flipped from borrowing from the school bond loan fund to paying back the school bond loan fund. And remember that fund is the way that the state helps us with bond projects. So basically, in the beginning years, when your bond payments are larger than what your mill rate will bring in, the school bond loan fund helps you cover your bond costs. And then eventually you get to the point where your taxes do cover the bond costs and more, and that's when you start paying back the school bond loan fund. So it's important to understand that we are in payback mode now, which is a good thing. The second piece is that while these are the 2018 and 2019, that is not when those funds were borrowed. That's when those funds were reinvested. So that's basically when we were able to cut our interest rates. We actually did a rollover into different bonds. And so I know it's unusual because you're trying to say, what did we do in 2018 and 2019? Those really go back to the 2009 and the 2002 bonds, but they were refinanced in these years. So that's why we refer to them that way.
All right, any questions or concerns on the debt funds budget amendment? All right, now we'll have the first reading of the 2023-2024 food service budget amendment is attachment D. Ms. Hendricks?
You will see that we are increasing our revenues by a nice amount in our food service budget. Food service monies can only stay in the food service program. So the money, the fund balance that ends up in this account can only be used to benefit our food service program. It can be salaries, it can be different food choices, it can be equipment, but because of the state of Michigan deciding that all kids eat for free, our revenues are up, our usage is up, so we do have an increase in our revenues of $628,000. We have an increase in our expenditures of $198,000. Part of that is we are reinvesting some of our fund balance in equipment. And there have been some increases in our food cost. So the bottom line on this budget, we're looking at adding $430,000 to our projected fund balance from the adopted budget.
Okay.
We will have to, with the food service budget, you're only allowed to keep 3.5 months in fund balance. We are currently in a spend down mode for last year because we were over we had an excess fund balance. This is going to put us even farther in excess fund balance. So as a district, we really are going to have to look at ways to get this down to the allowable cap that the state sets for us.
Just to add some context to that, Milan area schools, like a lot of other districts with the free for all, our usage went up. And also it's interesting, when you have free through the federal program, they actually pay more than what our meals cost when we charge a student. And so when you're doing free for all, you can start to build your fund balance. A lot of districts receive letters basically telling them that their fund balance was too large and that they needed to spend some of it. We received one of those letters, and we had needs. We did replace the walk-in refrigerator and the walk-in freezer at Paddock. We replaced a dishwasher at one of the buildings. We're buying quite a few carts and other equipment. But we're probably going to need to spend even more than that next year, which one thing we can do is look at salaries. But we also have to be very careful with our food service salaries, because if the state moves away from the free for all and our income goes back to what it used to be, we can't have a situation where our salaries are more than we can afford in the old school, old style type budget. Again, I will reiterate what Mrs. Hendricks said is, we do have a small fee that we charge food service, which is to help cover some of the indirect costs, some of the electric, some of the custodial costs, other things. But other than that, the funds cannot blend, and so there's no way that that fund balance can be used for anything other than food service.
And that's law set by the state.
The state partly
Microphone,
food
sorry.
service is highly regulated because it involves federal funds for free and reduced.
Microphone, sorry.
I'm sorry. The food service budgets and grants and bid process are all highly regulated by the state government because they involve federal dollars for free and reduced lunch. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in my comments, because we are bidding our food service out right now. But yes, those are rules that we have to follow. It's nothing that we can change.
Any other comments or questions? All right. Next, we'll move on to 2023-2024 student school activities budget amendment as an attachment E. Ms. Hendricks.
Just as a reminder, the student activities budget, all of our buildings have their own internal funds. Up until a couple years ago, they were all independent of our audit of our general fund budget. Due to some changes on the federal level, due to a GASB ruling, all of the student activity funds had to be pulled in under the district budget, so you are now seeing this. I'm still attempting to get a handle on the what the budget should be, partially because this all started happening about COVID time, and our revenues and our expenditures were not where they are today. So I am, based on use or current revenues and expenses, I'm proposing increasing the budget from 500,000 to 600,000. None of this, everything in here is monies that are brought in by the internal funds. None of this is general fund money.
This is like fundraising by the clubs.
It's fundraising. It's
Yeah.
There are athletics in some of these. There are bookmobile, insert activity that is not
Student councils,
district-wide.
honor
Yeah,
society,
it's-
all of those have internal accounts that are managed by.
each graduating class at the high school. So they bring in the money, they spend the money. I have to record the money. So are there any questions?
All right, hearing none. Those are the budget amendments for 2023-2024. Again, review these. Obviously, ask questions of Ms. Hendricks, Mr. Gearbaugh in regards to those. And we will be doing the approval of those at the next meeting. That moves on to the 2024-2025 general fund preliminary budget as an attachment F. Ms. Hendricks.
The first page, you will notice there's a little bit of a different setup on this than there was on the last one, on the last general fund. The first column on this page is what I am asking you to approve as our final budget for 24. So the numbers in the middle column on B should be the first column on F. Based on the information that is available to us at this time and some assumptions that we make as a district, we are looking at our revenues to be decreasing by $3.9 million. We are looking at a change in our expenditures of $2.0 million. So our revenues are going to exceed our expenses, or I'm sorry, our expenses are going to exceed our revenues by $3,400,000 based on this projected budget. That will drop our fund balance down to below 1%. This budget is based on the following assumptions. It's the elimination of a number of grants because they were one time only or they ended this year and I don't have numbers for them for next year, so I can't put them in the grant or in the budget. We made some assumptions based on information provided by the board president and the treasurer. I assumed a foundation allowance increase of $241 per pupil. That is the governor's proposal, which falls between the House and the Senate. And we also assumed a reduction in the student count of 25 students. We have been going down. We're hoping 25 is too many. We hope we keep more than that, but we won't know until the fall. I also made some assumptions on the expense side based on information provided by the board president and treasurer. There's a proposed 2% wage increase across the board. There's an increase of 15% to the health insurance premiums. We have been experiencing 10+% increases over the last couple of years. So the 15 is the number that we selected for this year, or this proposed budget. As I said, there's an elimination of state aid categoricals. I did leave some in, or at least in part. 29.7, the enrollment stabilization. All of these we've either received in the past, like the MIPSR's offset, or the 29.7 enrollment stabilization and the 22L district transportation costs are in all three versions of the state budget. We did not fund them at 100% of what we received this year. We funded them at maybe 50%. I did put in money for prior year special education payments. We have continually received those from the state. It's based on our current year's special ed costs, which won't be submitted until this fall. And we will receive that mid-year payment based on what our actual expenditures were probably at the beginning of the 25 year. I also included an Act 18 prior year special education payment. We received those from the ISD. Many of the expense budgets were reduced from the final amendment to this preliminary based on prior year usage. A lot of the buildings and grounds budgets, all of those single items that you saw on attachment B, that information or those numbers are taken out because those really would be hopefully one-time expenses. So those are the assumptions that I used to build this budget. Are there any questions?
So just again, want to understand this proposal is taking us to a 0.23% fund balance.
Yes.
This is taking us to a 0.23, less than 0.5% fund balance.
Yes. Which will trigger our need to report to the state.
Which is at 5%.
Yes. And we have, for the last couple of years, because our initial budget has fallen below 5%, we've had to report. We'll definitely have to report with this one also.
Just a quick comment. This is obviously assuming that the enrollment is going to be 1813, could be higher, could be lower. This is also assuming an increase per pupil of 241. Right now, the House's proposal is 217 per pupil increase. The Senate is 302. I also believe we are accounting for declining enrollment funds that exceed $200,000. There are some avenues that the board can consider in the future that may help our overall financial stability, which we'll talk about later. Thank you.
I do want to clarify on the projected pupil count. Our anticipated kindergarten numbers versus our graduating 12th grader numbers are actually down 52. So we are hoping to, through schools of choice and other means, which we normally do, cover a large chunk of those 52, and that's why we're only budgeting down 25. That's about how it worked out last year. We were at the same place. We were going to bring in about 50 less kindergartners than seniors graduating, and we ended up about down 25. So there is an assumption in there that we are going to pick up in some of the other grade levels to cover that difference between graduating and kindergarten.
Can I just comment also that what we're going to do here today is anticipate a 2% wage increase. Again, it wouldn't be popular at this time to say it would be 0, but we also didn't want to say it would be 4 or 5%. So rather than have an inaccurate assumption, the assumption now is 2%. Obviously, we will be discussing that in the future, but just wanted you to know that we could have budgeted 0 and we chose not to. On the health insurance premium, it is correct that I had lengthy conversation with our board president and with Mr. Gearbaugh about the health insurance premiums, just because they have been consistently high, and I have talked about that in previous meetings. Again, we're not going to know what that premium increase is going to be until we know what the loss history is and until we get the premium amount from the carrier. So it could be 10%, it could be 12%. We are budgeting conservatively at 15%. Thank you.
We would know the state categoricals when the final state budget comes out. Is that correct, or?
Yes, correct. So we would hope to do a amendment very early in the school year to get a lot of things corrected, to get the state aid corrected. As soon as we know our health insurance true increase, we can budget that. It's very difficult to build a budget by July 1st when the state doesn't have to have their budget built until October 1st. And so we have to make a lot of assumptions. This year, as you know, I spent quite a bit of time with President Sislo and Treasurer Farrow. I didn't want to make any of those assumptions on my own, so I put together a pretty lengthy document of explaining why and what was behind them, and then they helped determine what we should build into the budget as our assumptions.
Yeah, I'll channel Ms. Heike as best as possible. It just seems unfair that we have to submit these budgets prior to the state approving their budget. It never makes any sense to me. But that's what it is. And I mean, we've talked to our lawmakers, and I mean, even back, we have legislative sessions with the WISD. I implore them, Mr. Gearbaugh implores them, that the sooner that you are able to provide us those numbers, the sooner that we can make these assumptions more clear. So,
Mr. Sislo?
yeah, Mr. Farrow.
And I anticipate that we will probably discuss a budget amendment probably in the December timeframe.
Other questions or concerns?
One more thing I will add is we did have a legislative breakfast on Monday at the ISD, and that basically is superintendents and board members from around the county, and we invite all of our local legislators, Senate and House.
And federal.
Yeah, we do have federal there.
Mrs. Dingle was
Mrs. Dingle does come and give us federal updates. We spent a lot of time talking about the school aid budget, and actually one of our local reps is on the school appropriations committee. And we spent a lot of time talking to him about they need to move away from grants that can only pay for very specific things and move to more dollars in the foundation allowance that gives us more freedom to be able to use them where we need them most. Also talked about the fact that while they're touting a huge increase last year of 5%, that didn't even keep up with COLA and the rate of inflation. So it's nice that they are patting themselves on the back for a 5% increase, but it doesn't even meet our increased expenditures. And so as the veteran superintendent in the county, and I know Mrs. Pryor was there as well, I'm usually the spokesperson that goes after the legislators a little bit and puts them hopefully on their heels. And the sad thing was at the end of the meeting, the local rep who was on the appropriations committee said, with where the revenue consensus conference is, to expect, and the word he used was modest increases in the school aid over the next coming years. I don't ever like it when a legislator uses the word modest.
Yes, Ms. Gutierrez.
Mrs. Hendricks, can you just clarify for me? So what I'm seeing is a decrease in the total revenue of 3.9, almost $4 million.
That is correct.
Correct. So I know that part of that is due to the assumed decrease in 25 students, but what else is driving that decrease? Is that because we have no idea what might come in terms of grant dollars?
So in that if you look at the state line, there's a 2% or $2.6 million decrease. That is made up of the elimination of, I just drew a blank. Our 31AA.
Okay.
Mental health grant, which 31AA from last year we carried into this year, and that was about 200. We also had a school safety 97C of about 200 that we carried forward into this year. Both of those will be gone at the end of the school year. This year's 31AA is 440,000. That will be gone. 11T, which funds our district-wide social worker, homeless liaison, EL, and reading will be gone at the end of this year. We had ESSER 3 monies left over, which is funding a position that will be funded out of the general fund next year. It's a teaching position. That's how they were written into the budget. We just had monies left over last year that we're using up this year. So it's a number of those types of things.
So it's not purely a decrease. I want to clarify this.
It's not
It's
purely
not
a decrease
really a
in the
decrease
general
in the-
monies that we can spend on whatever we want.
Right. It is also because of the ending of many of these special programs and special funds. So when we say that that we're projecting a reduction of 25 students, those 25 students are not coming with a loss of $3.9 million.
No, 25 students is about $10,000.
Exactly. I just want to make sure that that's loud and clear, that this is part of multiple things, not
Yes.
just the assumptions we're putting into
And
it.
I did need to get a list of all of the grants that were being eliminated. I was working on this up until about 6:30 today.
I
So I
appreciate
can
your
provide that
pulling all of
information
this
to you
from your,
guys later. It didn't happen.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah, so the one thing that I hadn't been aware of until this year is like when you hear us talking about all these, 33.3 and 11T and all that, that refers to the specific line item in the state aid budget. So every time that Mr. McMahon gives us this update, it's referring to a specific line in the state budget that we're in at this time. So when you hear those letters and numbers, that's what is being referred to. All right, any other questions or concerns on the 2024-2025 preliminary general fund budget?
I'm just going to ask that everyone in the room spend time calling your legislators. They're right in the middle of building the state aid budget, and they need to hear from more than just superintendents and board members. They need to hear from parents and staff and community members. So make sure you're reaching out to them and letting them know.
Next up, the 2024-2025 debt funds preliminary budget in attachment G. Ms. Hendricks.
Similar to attachment C before, this is a 3-page attachment. The first page is the summary of the two debt funds, combined two debt funds. The debt payment is set in advance. I can tell you what our payments are going to be through the end of our debt payments. So those numbers are going to be pretty static. That's why we only amend this one time a year. Revenues will come in based on taxable values. We also, as Mr. Gearbaugh mentioned, have to pay back the state for the school bond loan fund, and that number is in each of the debt. It's split between the two debt funds. So all of this is tax money that comes in to make debt payments. None of this is general fund. And we are on track to have these all paid off in the next, I think, 13 years. So, any questions on the debt funds?
All right. Next up is the first reading of the 2024-2025 food service preliminary budget. Ms. Hendricks.
You will notice there are a few decreases to the revenue. Those are, they were grants earmarked for specific items. We had a grant that we received to purchase equipment to go into the cafeterias. There were some funds that were earmarked for fresh fruit and vegetables. Those are the types of items that were taken out of the revenues. And I projected similar revenues as to what we had this year for the balance of the grant, or for the new year. And I anticipated a few increased costs based on the cost of the food going up. I know we are going to go out for bid for our food service management company, and that potentially will be an increase to the budget. So there is something built in there for that, but I'm not sure at this point how much I should have built in. But we are anticipating, again, adding to our fund balance in our food service program.
I do want to make one clarification. We will still be serving fresh fruits and vegetables. It's just we will not be getting a grant to buy them locally. The state gives grants to districts that are in certain situations to attempt to buy from local farmers, and that expense is usually more than buying them from regular purchasing places. And that grant will be ending next year. So I want to make it clear, we will still be serving fresh fruits and vegetables to our kids at lunch and breakfast.
All right. And finally, the 2024-2025 student school activity ed funds preliminary budget. Ms. Hendricks.
I just carried the revenues and expenditures over from the final amendment I presented to you earlier today. As I said, this is my best guess. These are funds that I really don't control. I do monitor, but when the football team is having a fundraiser and they're putting money in, or the basketball team, or I have no control over what's coming in. I do make sure that it's coming in appropriately and going out appropriately. So I'm anticipating that we're going to kind of level off and stay at about 600, but we'll talk again in 12 months.
Any questions? All right. So again, those are all first readings. Obviously, questions or concerns, you can talk to Ms. Hendricks, talk to Mr. Gearbaugh. As they go through this further, they will let us know of any changes that may be considered at the next meeting, but we will be finalizing these at our first June meeting. So, all right, the next area of the strategic plan is learning environment and culture. I need a motion to approve the membership of the 2024-2025 Professional Development Advisory Committee as provided in attachment J. Mr. Gearbaugh.
Yes, just quickly. 2 years ago, we got to the point where we felt we needed more professional development time during the school year because we just can't get the substitutes to cover teachers to be able to provide them time to do certain things during the school day. And if you remember, that's when we switched 4 half days of professional development to 4 full days of professional development during the year. The only way that we can do that is to count some of that professional development time as contact time, which means we need to convert some of our DPPD, district provided professional development, to QPD, qualified professional development, so that we can count it as contact time. In order to do that, the state of Michigan has a very detailed process you have to follow to be able to count that time. And the first step of that is you have to have a professional development advisory committee that helps determine the topics that will be covered during the next year's professional development. And it also requires that professional development advisory committee be appointed by the board each year. So these are the teacher, and it also does require that the committee has a majority teachers on it. So you will see that the list has 8 teachers, 2 from each building, 2 administrators, 2 folks that are from other departments, and then 2 parents. That group will be meeting on May 30th to have the conversation and look at the topics, but it does take your appointment to that committee before they can meet.
Did I get a motion for this already?
No.
I apologize.
Call for it, but then.
Yeah, I didn't ask. So do I have a motion to approve the membership of the 24-25 Professional Development Advisory Committee as provided in attachment J?
Motion by Rosenleacher.
Support by Murray.
You guys can hit me. All right, so it's been moved and supported to approve the membership of the 24-25 Professional Development Advisory Committee as provided in attachment A and as presented by Mr. Gearbar. Are there any questions or concerns?
I just have one, and it may be because we've progressed to a point where I don't necessarily recognize all names on staff anymore. But do any of these members of the committee represent our special areas teachers currently?
Um,
I don't think so either.
we have special education
Yes.
on there.
Okay.
We requested volunteers 2 years ago when we started this committee,
Mhm.
and staff stepped forward.
Mhm.
I reach out to the current members and ask them if they have interest in remaining.
Mhm.
We did have one person step down this year, and we replaced them with someone else from their building. But these were the folks that stepped forward when we asked for volunteers 2 years ago.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you for that clarification. I guess I would just encourage engagement of those members of our staff then as we consider PD through this committee. So, thank you.
Mr. Sislo?
Yes, Ms. Gutierrez.
Just to make sure I'm understanding what you just said, Mr. Gearbot, you have already vetted that the list that we are approving tonight have agreed to serve for another year?
Yes.
Yes, okay, perfect, thank you.
All right, it's been moved and supported to approve the membership of the 2024-2025 Professional Development Advisory Committee as provided in attachment J. Ms. Murray?
Hi, oops, wrong row, sorry. Murray, yes. Pryor?
Yes.
Rosenleacher?
Yes.
Sislo?
Yes.
Farrow?
Yes.
Gutierrez?
Yes,
Motion carries 6-0.
All right, next up on the agenda in the area of personnel and leadership, we have a presentation from the Milan Education Association. Mr. Hoskins reached out to us via email to ask if he could present this evening, and he is here with membership to present. It'll be both, yeah, it'll project up here as well, so you don't have to crane your neck.
Yes, you need that light to be on.
Okay. Good to go. Alrighty. Good evening. My name is Jesse Hoskins, and I'm presenting on behalf of the Milan MEA negotiating team. Our team includes Jim Brousseau, our lead negotiator, Joe Gerwick from the middle school, Jessica Stafford from Simons, and Craig McMahon from Paddock. Currently, 82% of all staff are union members. In preparation for upcoming contract negotiations, we sent out a survey and 99% of our membership participated. The overwhelming majority of members stated salary and morale as their main concerns. So our purpose here tonight is, as the MEA, we would like to present this information to the Milan Board of Education. We negotiate with you. The superintendent negotiates on your behalf, but since not all of you are at all the negotiation meetings, we want you to understand the context ahead of official negotiations. There are two overarching questions we would like you to keep in mind during our presentation. The first is, what is our tradition for compensating teachers? And second, how do we provide an excellent education? We're going to begin with our issues, or we can ask what parts of our salary structure need to be corrected. It is important to remember that eliminating salary steps in 2011, which the Milan MEA did agree to at the time, is the cause for most of our salary structure issues. We made progress 3 years ago, but we have a years of service issue, and lack of salary growth has created a new pit of despair. Lack of proportional salary growth between administration and teachers, and a lack of teacher salary growth compared to foundation grant increases. So where were we 3 years ago? As you can see from the graph on the left, before the 2021 contract, after year 5, Milan teachers were woefully outpaced by comparably sized and neighboring districts. Many of us were in what we termed as the pit of despair. Employees who hadn't hit year 11 before the 2011 contract had no scheduled way of earning near what our peers were making. The 2021 contract added benchmarks at years 4, 7, 11, and 21 and corrected the pit of despair folks. So as you can see by the graph on the right, at year 11, we were corrected and we were competitive with schools around us. There are misconceptions about the 2021 contract. Any language stating that teachers received an 8% raise should actually say correction, and this is only a correction for a specific group. No one received a raise. While some teachers did receive substantial pay bumps, this only served to adjust everyone to the 2011 scale. The pit of despair employees lost over $100,000 over 10 years. A correction is not a raise. The 2021 contract also did not raise the ceiling. The top of the pay scale received less than a 2% raise over the 3-year contract at best. This represents roughly 1/3 of our staff. Essentially, the 2021 contract returned teachers to the 2011 pay scale. More than a correction, this action was a concession, a protection for only a specific group of teachers. So what needs to be corrected in 2024? Well, our first point is we have a years of service issue. Employees need to be paid for their years of service prior to being hired by Milan area schools. Many staff have left the district for higher salaries elsewhere. If those staff leave and then return to Milan, they receive a significant pay increase according to the new scale. For teachers hired prior to the loss of salary steps, the number of years of service they could bring to Milan were capped at 4. After losing steps, the salaries of new hires now could be matched to equivalent years of service in Milan up to year 11. This created an incoherent pay scale. Everyone's years of service should be recognized at Milan area schools to create consistency in the pay scale and as a mark of respect to the professionalism of teaching. All staff should be afforded the base salary credits that current new hires are receiving. And we have a specific example of this. Allison Davis was hired in August of 19. She resigned in June of 23 and was rehired here in Milan in December of the same year. She was given credit for prior years of service based on the current contract when she was rehired in December. Her new salary was almost $14,000 more than when she left. So she left on year 4 and came back at least year 11. Jake Lacrosse was hired a year before in August of 18. He brought with him 5 prior years of service that he did not receive credit for. So you can see his base salary, $59,000, and Jake was hired a year before Allison and currently makes about $12,500 less than her. If Allison had stayed at Milan, her salary would currently be the same as Jake's. Allison leaving Milan for 6 months led to an almost $14,000 salary increase. Our current contract states new hires will be assigned base salary credits equivalent to years of recognized teaching experience and will receive the corresponding base salary. New hires will not be assigned more than 11, and that could easily say up to 11. All employees should be grandfathered into the current contract language. We have 10 people in a Jake Lacrosse type situation. One person would get an increase of about $2,000. 3 people would get between about $5,000 and $6,000, and 6 would get between about $10,000 and $13,000. We've included teacher survey comments to give voice to our membership. It was apparent to us that many teachers were thorough in their comments and heartfelt in their comments, and many of their comments were similar. So we think it's important that we read those. A teacher commented, "We need to make sure that all teachers are paid in line with their experience. We cannot have situations where teachers are penalized for loyalty to the district by not correcting the pay experience gap." Point 2, we've had a lack of growth in teacher salaries from 2011 to 2023. As already stated, the 2021 contract returned teachers to the 2011 scale. The teachers highlighted in this graph all have over 11 years experience. All but Christina have over 20 years experience. The flat lines indicate a lack of salary growth over the past 12 years. Christina Mahaney's purple line takes a jump between 2020 and 2021. She was a Pit of Despair member whose salary received a correction. If an employee did not receive a correction from 2021 to 2024, they have received little growth. Mr. Adams and Mrs. Payne both deserve specific mention here. Both are beloved, long-tenured teachers in this district. They have been loyal, and their experience has provided our staff with stability during times of culture change. Both have positively impacted thousands of lives. Teachers stated, "I think it is time to focus on the veteran staff's pay. We've taken the cuts, supported the middles who got screwed, and now we are due." Another teacher said, "Lack of respect, appreciation for experience. I would love to see a financial raise that shows appreciation for what we do. Those of us who have been here a long time have seen very little in the past years. I understand we needed to balance things, but it feels like the 20-plus year teachers have taken the hit most of all. Our third point, we have a very specific lack of growth between years 11 and 21 in a teacher's career. The irony here is we've created a new pit of despair, and it includes the same people that were in the previous pit of despair. What we mean by that is, as you can see from year 11 to year 20, there is no scheduled growth. Now, we included year 16 because many other schools have a year 16 benchmark, and we don't. This is a time when we would expect contractual growth because it is a teacher's prime, and years of service demonstrate loyalty to the district. Point 4, we have a lack of growth compared to other districts. So you see the other districts' lines are inlaid with the line you just saw on the previous slide. We're in the same position we were 3 years ago with the same group of teachers. If you think back to the original graphs I showed you, the graph on the right stopped at year 11 when we were competitive. And you see that by year 16, we're outpaced. By year 20, we're dreadfully outpaced, and it's only in year 21 that we get a bump, and at that point, we are still outpaced. So open positions go unfilled, and we need competitive staffing practices. The administration makes it no secret to staff that they understand this district is a stepping stone, and they expect people to leave. This lowers the morale of staff who put their heart and soul into the district and stay. How will you build a district based on excellence if you don't expect anyone to stay and essentially voice that out loud? I'm worried about attracting staff moving forward. We have many staff members who will be able to retire in the next 5 years and would like to see a competitive plan to attract new staff to replace them. We believe that these issues should not exist. We have a lack of salary growth despite a healthy fund balance. Obviously, our attention was brought to the doom and gloom of the fund balance, but we see that a little differently. We've had steady increases in foundation grant money and a rising cost of living. The foundation grant is the money we receive per pupil from the state of Michigan. As you can see, from 2011 to now, that money has gone up almost every single year, and it's gone up a total of over 40% over that time. If you take a look at the year 11 master's scale and you apply the same percentage increase that was applied to the foundation grant increase and the Social Security cost of living increase, you can see how it would positively impact our salaries. Our question is, how has this money been allocated? If it's not been allocated for teachers, how has it been allocated? And again, we don't ask this as all the money be allocated to us. The same percentage growth is what we're interested in. Our fund balance. We know that the state requires a 5% fund balance. We know that the district would like to keep a 10% or above fund balance. I think that we all know our superintendent and board well enough to know that we would not get to a 1% fund balance. So what is the difference between the 15.4% number and the 10% number that you stated? Is it assigned funds? Is it unassigned funds? There's some things that we don't see clearly there and we don't understand. So again, here is what we don't understand. During this time, pay increase for teachers has been flat, but pay increase for administration has been positive. There are multiple important visuals here. First, the flat purple line is the top of the teacher pay scale. It has been the same since 2011, and it does not exist. It is imaginary. Dan Adams is a 36-year veteran of Milan area schools, and he is not at the top of our scale. Second, both Dan Adams and Cara Payne's salaries have increased less than $9,000 over a 10-year span. Third, during this same time, our superintendent's salary has increased much more rapidly, certainly comparable to foundation grant increases and rising cost of living. Now, do we begrudge Mr. Gearbaugh this? I don't. Some might, I don't. He is a loyal staff member. He has provided stability to the district. Sound familiar? Do we value Mr. Adams and Mrs. Payne less than we value Mr. Gearbaugh? Here is another way to look at the lack of teacher salary growth over the past 12 years compared to Mr. Gearbaugh's salary growth and foundation grant and inflation increases. This shows lack of teacher salary growth over the past 3 years compared to administrative growth and foundation grant increases. Now I want to make this clear that teacher raises have not been percentage based. They are flat dollar amounts. We're using percentages to show overall growth. Notice Jeremy Davies' growth is higher because he hit the year 21 benchmark during this contract. This condenses the previous 2 slides. Again, not all teachers received 2.6% raises. Unless one hit a benchmark, teachers with over 11 years experience received raises of $500, $750, and $850 the last 3 years. Also, it's worth noting that the administration percentage does not include the technology director or the finance director. Those numbers would undoubtedly raise that percentage even more. Between inflation, other districts negotiating raises, increased state funding, and raises awarded to administration and other district professionals, the time is now to push hard for increased compensation. So what is the cost of not paying teachers competitively? Open positions are difficult to fill or left unfilled. Quality, appropriately certified applicants are attracted to districts offering more. 54 members of the MEA Teachers Bargaining Unit, and this includes counselors, social workers, etc., have left the district between June of 21 and May of 24. And our bargaining unit has about 125 members at any one time. Morale is decreased among staff. Staff are undercompensated and look for other positions to better able support families and increased expenses. I am concerned about high turnover like everyone. There seems to be an attitude that we are a training ground for staff. This is an insult to those of us who have been loyal employees for years. The constant turnover decreases everyone's morale. I have not stayed in Milan because I cannot get a position elsewhere. So what are the solutions and where do we begin? salary steps need to be reinstated. Without a coherent salary structure, we'll continue to see inconsistencies in pay that are frustrating to staff and unattractive to potential candidates. If we had salary steps, the correction that was made 3 years ago and the corrections that we still need to make would take care of themselves. Where will the money come from? We talked about the fund balance, the foundation allowance that has grown over 40% since 2011. We obviously can look at our budget, assigned and unassigned funds. What are other districts doing to competitively compensate their staff? We also have a decreased enrollment, as you mentioned earlier. We might need to look at managing this, right-sizing this, adjust staff numbers to student numbers. As you can see, teacher-to-student ratio has increased over the years. With enrollment continuing to decrease, it's time we take a closer look at right-sizing where it is needed. There's a lot of great information here, so I'm going to attempt to break it down concisely. First thing is, if you take a look at the second column, 2021, 2022. Okay? A reminder, in 2021, we agreed to the 2011 pay scale. So our salaries in 2021 were already 10 years old. Again, I want to draw attention to the top of our salary structure that's circled, that is imaginary, that no one in this district makes. If you take a look at the red and yellow boxes, inflation and foundation, this is what it would look like if our salaries were consistent with inflation and foundation grant percentage increases. We believe that some combination of these two is where we should look for some direction moving forward. Finally, and most sobering, buying power. For salaries to have the same buying power as they did in 2011, they would need to equal these amounts. And obviously we're nowhere near there. Teachers are behind and we're feeling it. Here is a graph of the previous slide with other districts added in. After year 11, as I stated earlier, Milan is dreadfully outpaced. From years 11 to 20, we have 10 years of little growth, none that is scheduled. The purple and black lines show what our salaries would look like compared to others if they were consistent with inflation and foundation grant percentage increases. So, in conclusion, why raises need to happen? What we should value. We should value longevity and loyalty. Teachers who stay past year 11 are generally here to stay. Reward those employees who become institutions in our district. Again, we value Mr. Gearball, as we should, but do we really value Dan Adams and Cara Payne like we should? We should value culture. What is culture? Culture is a funny buzzword everyone uses, but culture is simply how we do things. And how we do things is always changing. In 2001, our high school enrollment was about 650 and we were in, the old building. Fast forward 10 years, school of choice enrollment's a lot higher. We're in the new building. Okay, for teachers, we lose salary steps, big changes there, changes in culture. Fast forward another 10 years, 3 years ago, we're fixing issues that needed to be corrected based on what happened in 2011. And now there's more issues that need to be fixed. With all of this, we need to lean into what we value the most. So I go back to the two overarching questions. What is our tradition, and how are we achieving excellence? Our tradition is clearly our people. Individual teachers, administrators, counselors, lunch staff, bus drivers, office staff. This is who we are. We are not a plug-and-play system. Individuals matter here. My two boys were excited about going to kindergarten because they were going to be in Mrs. Payne's kindergarten class. It wasn't about going to school. It was about going to school every day to see Mrs. Payne. And they were extra excited because they got to have the same teacher who in her first year taught my sister. They feel the same way about Mrs. Maycheck and Mrs. Knotts. These teachers are worth and worthy of every penny that we can possibly pay them. Why? Because my kids love their teachers. And because they love their teachers, they love learning. And that's the most important thing that I could ask a school district to provide for my children. Dan Adams and Mr. Gilzo were leaders in Paddock when I was in 4th grade. Dan has been a Milan institution for over 25 years. Heck, my 4th grade year, Julie Helber was his student teacher. These teachers are our tradition. Mr. Gearbaugh is our tradition. He's a career Milan guy, lives around the corner. His 2 boys graduated from this building. We will only achieve excellence, which is a continual pursuit, by honoring the individuals in our district. Honor us not with words or resolutions, but with competitive compensation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hoskins. Just hold up before you, just leave it up because I want to. So very, very nice presentation. Thank you very much. Yeah, stay. Well, you can have a seat for now. You can do whatever you want to do. Except ask for a raise. No, this is a difficult conversation, and I mean, I won't say how old I was when I had Mr. Adams teach me in a play called Oliver back then. But this board hears you, and we understand. I think one of the main points that we need to take from the presentation is that we did fix some of those things that were brought forward at 3 years ago, and this board will continue to look at these things that you're bringing forward and do our best with the resources that we have. So I'd appreciate with the acknowledgement of the presentation that was made in regards to the budget. And it does take, I mean, I really appreciate your ratification of the last contract. And obviously we're going into negotiations to look at a new contract, and we're going to obviously look at what you provided here to move forward with that. And in your presentation, you did say, there's things that you don't understand. And I completely understand that, because there's things that I don't understand. There's all these people up here don't understand everything. And that's why we're here. That's why there's 7 of us. That's why we try to figure out as best as possible. It's not that we don't want to pay you as much as we can. I mean, we are limited by some of the things that the state dictates. That's why Mr. Yerbaugh stated the things with the legislators. Um, so you are being heard, and I hope you do understand that. Um, what I'm saying. We would like to go through the presentation because we just have just to have a discussion, if that's possible. If you would like to just if would that be okay? Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, not necessarily. We're not going to negotiate. It's not appropriate to negotiate here at this board meeting. But I think this is an opportunity for education, because we have new board members here as well that weren't part of those negotiations, and don't fully understand as well. So, I guess before we begin that, are there any board members that would like to say anything? Yeah, probably what I'd like to do is just start at the beginning of the presentation and then kind of look at each slide, um, just to more fully understand some of the things that were put in there. So we can go to I think we started with slide 6. I think this summarize. Just go back to that slide, the slide before. I mean, this does summarize that. I appreciate the acknowledgement that we did make changes that helped. So, and I think this board's committed to making changes to help as best as possible. So, okay, so the next slide, yeah. I also, as part of those negotiations, we did change the Schedule B compensation as well, right? And we added things in regards to longevity within Schedule B. Is that correct? Okay. I just want that to be noted, as that was part of the package as well, that there were changes in Schedule B and extra duties, right? Yeah. And then I mean, one of the main things to understand here, specifically in regards to administrators versus the MEA contract, is that the administration chose to take the money that was allocated for they took it all in salary, so 4% the first year, 2% the second year, 2% the third year, where that money allocated for the teachers was divided up into different things such as Schedule B and the corrections and things such as that. So that's my understanding of the way that contract worked, and that explains some of the difference between the administration and the MEA contract.
I understand that. I don't know if that's really totally comparable to one another because there is no administration Schedule B or anything like that. And again, our raises were not based on percentages either. So I understand your point, but I don't think it's fully comparable.
Okay, that's fair. I just wanted to say it. Yep. We can go to any other comments on this slide. Go to the next slide. Yep, next. This first example. Does anybody want to speak to years of service? Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to jump in on this one because this is very descriptive of my own experience when I was an employee of the district. And I just want to thank you for raising that point of years of service. And to me, it's very tied into the stepping stone or training ground mentality that unfortunately occurs. And I would like to say that we're not the only district where that occurs. We are unfortunately in competition with 8 other member districts, and there are some heavy hitters that are, within 20 minutes driving distance of us. And so Milan is not the only district that experiences that. And we also have an ISD that sucks a lot of positions. I can't tell you the number of people who I used to work with here that I now work with there. So it's really interesting, just that shift dynamic across our 9-member districts in our ISD. But I think more broadly, we need all 9 of our districts could look at that more comprehensively. But digressing a little bit, the years of service was something that really affected me because I left the state to start my teaching career, and then I came back, and I did 3 years in charter, and then I got hired here in 2017. So really similar to Mr. LaCrosse, just a year ahead. When I came back to public school in Michigan, at that time I had 10 years of teaching experience. So I was not a newbie, but I think I hired into the district around, I don't know, 55,000, something like that. And that's pretty much where I stayed. And, colleagues of mine who were in the pit of despair that got corrected in 2021 got, $10,000-$15,000 salary bump. And I stayed at 55 or 56 where I left. And I came to Milan not believing that it was a stepping stone. I live here. Obviously I have to live here because I'm on the board. But, and I intended to finish my career in Milan. Sorry, it's still hard to talk about. So that's why I'm sitting here, actually, because this is another way that I can contribute to the district in meaningful ways. But yeah, salary was a huge reason why I had to consider, because I just was not, I was not ever going to recover, anything at that point. So I fully appreciate this. I don't know what the answer is. In full disclosure, I'm not a negotiating or voting member on this coming contract because I have that conflict of interest. But I fully intend to participate in the discussion as I'm allowed to by statutes. And I think this is something that we need to look at as a district, because the old way of doing things, where we're recognizing loyalty by simply time in district and we're restricting new hires. So that was the other thing, was when I came from my NHA school, I was capped per the contract language. I could not come in and make higher than any Milan teacher, even if I had more experience than them. And that was frustrating because I didn't feel valued. I was bringing 10 years of experience. I had certifications in the state of Georgia that, didn't transfer, but our experience comes with us whether the certificate does or not, right? And I think as a district, and indeed as a state, we need to start looking at our teachers differently in terms of what they're bringing. We have so many teachers now who are coming to our profession from other avenues, right? They are coming through alternative certification programs. They're coming in as second career people. And so we can't be looking at salary placement anymore along the lines of, well, how many years did you have at this district, or how many years have you been here? So I appreciate this point very, very much, and I think it's compelling. So I don't want to take up too much more time, so thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments about point 1?
I just want to state that individually, I don't want to speak for the rest of the board, but I see and understand the discrepancy, and I appreciate you bringing it to our attention.
I do. I think it's important to note, though, that the discrepancy was noted at the negotiations in 3 years ago. I mean, it was noted, and there was no movement to adjust it at that time. So
I think that's true.
yeah,
And my recall during that time period was that it wasn't seen as an issue at that time. Obviously, now it has become an issue.
right. Yeah.
And I understand the discrepancy.
Okay.
I don't want to
Right.
speak for others, but
No, I guess I'm saying.
anticipate
like,
us having to have
Mr.
discussion
Sisso,
about
can I
that.
comment on that as well?
Yeah, sure.
I think that, I don't want to speak for you at all, Mr. Farrell, but I think that 3 years ago, there were so many issues that we felt were a higher priority that maybe something like this gets pushed down. And as we start to do things better, things that we aren't doing well are going to come to the surface and be much more glaring.
Fair point.
Okay.
Fair point. Yep.
Thank you, and I think that's very, very valid.
So I think we can go on to point 2. Does anybody have any comments on point 2? And you can go to the next slide and then the slide after that. I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, obviously I do see, I think this is another thing, a glaring thing that you pointed out, you know, this lack of growth between 11 and 20. And it's something that needs to be looked at.
Just briefly, I agree that we should take a look at that. I've had just, you know, kind of community conversations with staff members that are new to the district. I'm friends with this person who interviewed here a few years back and ultimately declined the position because of this precise lack of clarity, I guess I want to say, about where one can expect to be at certain points throughout their career. You know, if I come here and I stay here, what can I plan on? What can I expect to be able to put into my investment accounts? And so having a gap between, you know, of 10 years is significant, and it doesn't compare very well with other districts. You know, we're not the only ones, but I think that I would agree.
The other thing
I'd like to look at that.
The other thing with this is, like, with past contracts that I've had been a part of, it has been the more senior teachers that have stepped up and said we should take care of the younger teachers. I mean, that was part of negotiations. I mean, teachers that were teachers when I was here, like Mr. Porter and such, you know, they said, you know, we need to take care of the younger teachers, and obviously this is a new focus now. So I mean, I think that's a change. I think that's something that happened with the past contracts, as far as my perspective on it.
Mr. Sissel, I'd like to make another comment too. I mean, I understand the counter argument of we are somewhat beholden as a school district to many factors, state aid and grants, and so we fully understand the counter argument of we don't always know what we can count on, so how can we create a schedule that we might not be able to meet? But we feel like the counter argument to that provides the exact same result. Whether we do have a schedule or whether we don't have a schedule, we're going to face the same challenges to meet that schedule. So at least if we have something that we can point to that makes sense, that we can aspire to, maybe that's a better option of the two. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yep.
Mr. Sislo?
Yeah.
I think the one comment I have looking at this, having read it before and then hearing the presentation today, I think it's a credit to our staff that 3 years ago they wanted to make corrections on the front end of the schedule. There are a lot of districts that don't do that. And so looking at that 10-year gap, then for people who've been here, I think it just kind of shines a light on that.
Oh yeah,
But,
I'm not suggesting that tenured teachers continue to do that.
Oh,
I'm
no,
just,
for sure.
Yeah, I'm just saying
For sure.
That's if we're talking about tradition and history, that's the tradition and history that I know of with the past contracts. So, yeah, point 4. The one question I had here was the open positions go unfilled. So I'm trying to understand that, because I feel like when there is an open position, Mr. Yearbaugh brings it to us, especially in Gen Ed, that they are filled. So I would like some more understanding in regards to that.
There's a special ed position at the high school that's been interviewed for a number of times that
Okay.
I personally think other buildings give people because of the situations, but it's never been filled.
Okay. Okay. So just, is that the one at the high school, the special ed at high school?
Yeah. I think there were some behavior specialists that were left open for
Okay.
a while.
Okay.
We didn't have candidates.
Okay.
So not currently open, but
In the past, there's been, yeah, sure. Okay. I just wanted to understand that better. I appreciate that.
there's I don't know, a lot of speakers.
No, go ahead.
There's a quality of applicants issue as well.
Okay,
Sometimes there's only 2 or 3 people that are qualified that even apply.
okay,
Bill, it's not.
okay, okay. Anything else on point 4? So then, yeah, can go forward to page 20. Yeah. So it appears that, I mean, you used the same 241 number that we're using for projection, the increase from 24 to 25. We're starting from the same foundation allowance increase from the governor, at least. I think the difficult part here is, looking at those numbers for 21 through 24. A lot of that is, in relation to the pandemic and the legislature waking up and understanding that that they had something to correct. And yeah, I mean, but now potentially, we're not going to obviously, we're not going to see another 5 or 5.2% increase based on what we're hearing in regards to that. So that's my comment with the foundation grant.
As somebody who's really, really, really new to all of this, and going into 6 months, I've never negotiated a contract, but looking at, I definitely see your point with the raises, my job gets step increases, so it's something that we can count on. So I understand that disparity when you're unsure. But knowing that it's how contracts are negotiated and people agree on. So there's lots of things, and sometimes we agree to stuff and there's unintended consequences we don't foresee. And I think that kind of we found ourselves in this situation now, and so we're trying to correct that. But like really thinking about the foundation grant, learning about the budget, I've been surprised to learn how many things we can't spend money on. I'm like, so like that food service thing we were just going through, that really irritates me that we have that money and now the government, they're paying for it and we can't use it anywhere else. That's money that we could. So those types of things bother me. But what I wanted to say is we were just sat at this legislative breakfast 2 days ago, and they're talking about this modest increase, trying to really talk down how much our school districts are going to get. And Mr. Gearboss speaks up and says, I have a group of teachers that are looking at this foundation grant. Why can't we return this to them? And you say we're going to have a 5% increase, but then our insurance goes up 15%, so we have to pay for that. The gas on the cars go up, this much, we have to pay for that. The gas on the buses, this costs more, you're requiring this unfunded mandate. So on the surface, it looks like we have 5% to give, but we don't. And I don't think that they make that as clear when everything else seems to eat it up. And so I'm just learning about how that comes about, how we can really pay out what we are getting in. I think that a lot of people spoke to it that day, as did Mr. Gearbaugh, that it's just, they have to do more. It's not enough to just give our teachers the little bit of whatever's left over. And that seems to be what we have been doing because that's all we can do. And I dislike it. But I think sometimes that amount is misleading. Just what I really want to say.
Mrs. Pryor, can I comment on that? And
yes, any insight you can help me with
okay.
is great.
Well, I appreciate your comments, and I think that we have a strong understanding of what you're talking about. And so, not to jump ahead, but if you just take what you said in isolation, it makes total sense. But then when we look at it as teachers compared to, let's say, administrative raises, then that's where we go, wait a second. If it was pretty even across the board, then we get it. But if it isn't, then we don't get it. So again, I don't mean to jump ahead, but we've tried to look at it as multi-factor as possible. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, we can go to the next slide. I think this is a little bit of what Ms. Pryor was saying, as well as, yeah, I mean, I could see, obviously there's increased costs, but then if there's, this difference between non-MEA folks and MEA folks, I can understand. But I mean, this is allocated in various other ways. I mean, it's heating, electricity, fuel, health insurance.
I guess I would just ask, aren't those things true in other districts as well? We saw that slide, there's our,
As far as how their money's allocated.
yeah,
Or-
they have certain restrictions on spending.
Yeah, I mean, we're yeah, as far as I mean, like I said, with the state funding that comes in, like if we get grants, I mean, we have to spend it on those specific things. So it's not just Milan. This would be applicable to.
Right, so I guess I'm saying that doesn't really explain away the gap between us and other districts, because we're all in the same boat when it comes to restrictions on spending money.
Okay, right. No, I understand. So I think in order and then not get ahead of what like Mr. Hoskins did, I think there are some other things that we can talk about in regards to that. Yep, that's fair. I understand what you're saying. Yep. Okay.
You can call me Jesse.
Yeah, go ahead, Ms. Jepson. Yes.
I guess because you brought up, I know the district's increase expense has been through the years with healthcare, but ours has also. So even though that looks like a flat line, I take home less money than I used to.
Good point. Fair point. Yep.
For many years.
Sure. Yep. Yeah, Mr. Brousseau.
Years ago, like not even years ago, more than 5 or 6 years ago, everyone had their own foundation grant number, and Milan was always the lowest.
That's a good point.
That's not the case anymore. Now the whole county, with the exception of Ann Arbor, gets the same amount. So it begs the question, why can other districts pay their teachers more? You know, what are they doing with their pie, dividing it up, that allows them to have more of the teacher salary?
Okay. It's a fair point.
Mr. Sislo? If I can just chime in, and I lean on Tom to correct me on this, but my understanding of the Milan budget is that currently everything comes out of our general fund, whereas other districts have different financial arrangements as well.
Correct. That's right. I just didn't. We're gonna get to that. I
Okay.
didn't want to get ahead.
Okay, perfect.
But you,
The question was raised and I wanted to make sure
Yeah.
that we weren't
Yeah,
not
no,
responding
we
to
will
it.
get to the. I definitely want to answer Ms. Mahaney's question.
Okay,
I
thank you.
understand. So, Mr. Gearbaugh, yeah, did you want to speak to this?
No, if you're
Oh, yeah. No, I don't like to get out of order. I'm sorry. Even though I don't get.
That's why you have to call him Mr. Hoskins.
Yeah. Yeah. So this slide. Yeah, I appreciate. I'm glad that you do recognize that. I mean, we definitely want to stay away from the 5%. I mean, it's just we don't want the state to be in here doing things to us. You do. I mean, we have gone down in fund balance, and the auditors, when we talk to the auditors say that we should be between 10 and 15. But then your point is taken in regards to, you know, what's that between the 10 and 15 as far as unassigned and assigned fund balances, and what are the opportunities with that? But
Thank you.
yep. But I mean, we have spent down the fund balance as you know during the past contract. So, any other comments regarding that?
just one, I think it is important to note that your goal of 10% is on the total fund balance. It's not on the unassigned. So even though you have some fund balances assigned, you're including those assigned fund balances in your goal to have a 10% fund balance.
Okay, right. So yeah, we can go on to the next one. This one I just want to when I looked at past contracts, I don't think 85,000 was the top in 2011. I'd appreciate it if you could verify that, but I don't think 85,000 was the top because I think I feel that 85,000 was adjusted prior to the 3-year contract. So
Does it matter?
well, I mean, just that you stated that it's been 85,000 since 2011.
I'd have to go back and look at our
Okay.
source documents. To be honest with you, I can't tell you 100% if that was exact in 2011. I
Okay.
can't recall that.
I don't know
I'd have
that
to
it
look
matters.
at
I guess it matters that I just want to present factual information. I mean,
You're right, it was not 85,
okay.
and I didn't notice this when it was shown to me. When we had steps, there was no need for a number. This only came about after we lost steps in the salary scale. did
Okay.
Whatever it did. So
I'm not.
We established a number that basically was above what we thought anyone would get, and I'm not sure why. It's just, we decided to have it. But we knew nobody was gonna get paid that much.
Okay. And then the salaries for Miss Payne and Mr. Adams, does that include any Schedule B or extra duty? Do you know offhand?
No.
Mhm.
It does not.
No.
Okay. It's their contract. Okay. Okay. And if it doesn't matter or not, when you look at the superintendent, that number that you're showing includes other things besides the contract. So there's things that when we make those comparisons, I just want to make sure that those comparisons are fair.
Okay.
So
The Schedule B is still extra duty that we do.
absolutely.
We have to
That,
pay more to get it,
yeah.
so it's not like, I take it as, instead of insurance, I get something else.
Right. I'm just trying to explain this. I mean, it's the same for Mr. Gearbaugh. I mean,
And everybody doesn't have an opportunity
to
get
do
the
that.
Schedule B,
No,
right?
I don't disagree. I just wanted to understand because, I mean, there are things within Mr. Gearbaugh's contract where he does have to work in order to obtain those things as well. I mean, so if we're going to include things that people have to work toward to attain, I just want to provide that comparison similarly because I'm not trying, please don't take my questioning of this graph in that way. I respect you guys just as you respect Mr. Gearbaugh. I want factual information displayed, and I want to know, I mean, there's things that Mr. Gearbaugh does that's allowed by his contract that's reflected in that number. So it's not the base contract that's there. So I appreciate it doesn't matter, but it matters because I want it to be factual.
Can I?
Yeah.
Just in the numbers that you have, about 7 years ago, the board realized that I was not able to take all of my vacation days and basically allowed me to work 10 more days a year and trade in those vacation days. So about $8,000 of that jump over this time period is me starting to work 10 more days a year. So that is extra duty. I'm working more time to earn that money.
And we don't have that option.
Fair, right? Don't disagree because it's not in the contract.
Yeah.
It's just it's a comparison between contracts. So,
I understand.
Yep. Any questions on that one? The next slide. Any questions here?
I think, Mr. Sislo, the one thing that, and I recognize it because it's glaring and it stands out, is the athletic director. That was actually. I
Oh,
think-
we're not to that point
Oh, we're not.
yet.
I'm
We're
sorry.
not.
My apologies.
Yep,
I
sorry.
jumped ahead.
I'm keeping you in line. Then, so we can go to the next slide, but I think, if you want to speak, is this what you want to speak towards?
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
I was gonna say, particularly looking at the athletic director, that was a correction this year. So much like what we talked about in correcting 3 years ago, and needing to look at making some additional corrections, the AD was a correction, not a raise per se, if we're gonna use the same language.
And Mrs. Rosen-Leacher,
Yes.
and also I'd like to point out with that too is, again, we don't begrudge that correction, but our corrections are also in our percentages. So, we were trying to be as fair as possible, showing reality. We weren't saying, hey, let's put this number up there to drive up the percentage to make it look worse, because all of our percentages are with the pit of despair corrections as well.
Mr. Sis?
Yeah, Miss
Oh,
Gutierrez.
Did
Yeah,
Mr. Farrow chime in first?
Miss Gutierrez.
Okay, I don't want to speak over Tom.
Yeah.
This was one of the very first votes that I was participating in when I came on the board, this increase in the salary of the athletic director. And I remember at the time that I preferred the language of market adjustment, and I would lean into that now as well instead of correction, because a correction suggests that there's a right and wrong. And I'm looking around this room and I'm seeing people who are my husband's colleagues, who are my children's teachers, who are very beloved. If I have to hear about Mrs. Jeffers one more time at home, she might as well just move in. So if we had all the budget in the world, I don't think there's enough money in the world to pay all of you what I truly think you're worth. So I think instead, and many of you know by training, an epidemiologist and a data scientist, and so I really appreciate this data. I live on data. And because of that, I see our goal as a board and as a community to get our teachers paid based upon where the market is, that you are reasonably due compensation for, which is why when this question came up about the athletic director, I had asked at the time to see where other athletic directors were in the county and at neighboring schools. And Mr. Gearba did the work to pull those. And we arrived at a salary that we felt was competitive and was reflective of where the market was for someone in that position. At the time, I asked, well, why aren't we just doing this for everybody? Clearly, we know that we have other staff in the district who are underpaid. There seems to be, I had learned as I was coming on the board, that there was a group of folks who were non-contracted and didn't have the opportunity to come to negotiation. And so we have been over time correcting some of those salaries to come into market adjustment. And I see part of where we are now in this conversation, driven by the data you've been sharing, helping open our eyes to some of the issues. Clearly, we can't do everything at once, and so I appreciate the history of what was corrected or solved last time, and I, respect my fellow board members very much, and I know that we are all deeply invested in trying to tackle other issues in this coming cycle. And so I want to point out that athletic director, I don't think is in any way that we value that person more, that anything like that, that it is in the spirit of, and many of us said at the time, that this is a step whereby we are working incrementally through our staffing to get to market adjustment for all of the beloved members of our family here. And so I want you to know that that's the way I see it. And the word correction, I think, should really kind of be framed in where we want to get to equity with other teachers and other colleagues across the county. And so I appreciate this, putting this in perspective. I appreciate the data, and I think actually it speaks to the spirit of what we believe we want to really achieve overall classes in our district. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Any other comments on that slide? All right. Or this one? We can go to the next.
You said I can pass this one?
Yeah, pass that one.
Just to note, Mr. Sislo,
Yeah.
I note that it says it does not include the salary increases for technology director or finance director. Those two were market adjustments to bring those more in line with the market. So
The finance director did not have. a
not
market
finance
adjustment.
director. Okay,
No.
technology director. I
yeah, the
recall that
Technology
vote.
director, yeah.
By looking at this, I assume that this data came from the transparency website, right? Yeah. It's,
And Mrs. Gutierrez, you understand that our issue was not that anybody was adjusted. Like we
100%.
We value these people just as much as you do, and they deserve every bit of it. It was just to show.
I agree completely, and I wanted to make sure that from the way I viewed this is I appreciate the data, and I think it actually shows not that there's a contention about some getting more than others. I think it shows, and I want to reinforce that from my viewpoint, it shows that we as a district and as a board are working towards those market adjustments and have that as part of our core beliefs, my core belief. Thank you.
This one, does the 54 members, does that include members who have retired as well? Okay. Do you know offhand what the breakdown?
No, but
Okay.
it's pretty small.
Okay. Okay. And then do you know how many administrators have left during the same time period?
From 21 to 24,
Or if you guys know?
3 out of 11 administrators left.
3 out of 11. Okay. Yeah, Mr. Farrell.
So I'd like to comment on this slide. The slide here says, what is the cost of not paying teachers competitively? I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong slide. I apologize.
Oh.
I apologize.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess what I wanted to say too is that I just want to confirm with Mr. Gerbo. My understanding is that the general ed positions have not gone unfilled.
No, gen ed positions have been filled.
I mean, I'm sorry that they have been filled.
Yes.
Correct.
We have a couple of additional positions that we added. The special ed position at the high school, we've been trying to add a position. The behavior specialist position, we've been trying to add. We are right now working to bring our speech pathologists back into Milan employees instead of contracted employees. And we're being successful with that. So the positions that have gone unfilled were added positions in very specialty areas.
And I assume that many of those positions were a result of grant dollars. There was,
Either grant or special ed funded, yes.
thank you.
And Mr. Sissel, I want to say this as well. You know, many of you know me well, and I'm not very doom and gloom type person. And so I hope you know that I personally present all this information, you know, the way that I am. We're presenting these numbers, but there's no like, got you, look
Oh,
how
no.
bad it is.
Oh, no.
You know, that's
Okay.
not, and so,
I'm not,
you
we're
know,
not
I
taking
just want to make that very, very, very clear as well.
Okay.
You know, I would not,
None taken.
anything that I stand up and say is something that I believe in.
Absolutely.
You know,
I have no.
and so that's why, you know, conversely, when, you know, I hear some of the doom and gloom projections, that bothers me, because I never want to, I know that you have to make projections, but I never want to make projections in a way that is a hindrance or
Yeah,
running from behind or things like that.
That's fair. But I mean, they also have to be realistic based on the information that we have. I mean, unfortunately, sometimes realistic is doom and gloom, and sometimes realistic can be positive.
Yeah.
You are a positive gentleman. I like to be a positive person.
Mhm.
And there are a lot of
I don't feel
unknowns.
any gotcha moments, and I hope you don't feel any gotcha moments from us. I mean,
No, I think there are things that are points that are arguable
Sure.
that I don't know right now is the place to, you know, argue them fully.
okay. No,
But-
I just wanted to say that, I mean, point well taken. From my perspective as treasurer, I mean, there are just a lot of unknowns at this time. So what we're presenting in terms of an amended budget or a future budget is what we think is worst case scenario. We don't think that we're going to be at worst case scenario, but you know, there really is a lot of unknowns.
Yeah. And Mr. Farrell, that is fair. I think that you know, our membership would be maybe a little angry if I didn't say to, you know, Mrs. Gutierrez and Mrs. Murray and Mrs. Pryor that we've dealt with a lot of worst case scenarios over the years, and that can grind on you over time. And so while I understand reality fully, we've dealt with a lot of worst case scenarios that often weren't as bad as we thought they were going to be, and we have taken the brunt of some of those. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, and I hear you. From my perspective, I just want you to be aware that I've only been on the board for less than 4 years. I think that I have tried personally and as a board member to get as much information to my fellow board members, to work with the district office as closely as I can, and as actively as I can. And I can say for myself, I'm not going to put something in front of the community that I don't think is realistic. And this, what we approved tonight, or not approved tonight, but what we plan to vote on next meeting, is a lot of that is because there are unknowns. Not because we want to paint doom and gloom, but there are a lot of unknowns. Everything is costing more. That's just the reality. And so we have to account for that. Hopefully the foundation grant amount is going to be higher than what we're anticipating. Hopefully our expenses are going to be lower than what we anticipate. But I just want to note too that since I've been on the board, the fund balance has decreased. We have made a proactive effort in ensuring that the fund balance decreased. And it will continue to decrease. That's just my points.
Thank you.
Mr. Sislo?
Yeah.
I think it's important to reiterate something that Mrs. Heike often says, and you said earlier this evening. This is one of the complicating factors that the state budget and district budgets are out of alignment, where ours is due 3 months earlier,
Yeah.
right, than the state. But it doesn't make sense. Why? I mean, in a perfect little world, a budget would be January to December. That's how we run our household budgets, right? And I think we need to continue to advocate with our senators and our representatives. They've got to do more to bring these two things in alignment, so districts aren't playing guessing games with the people who matter most. And I think that's it can't be said enough that the state's playing games and they think it's all sunny and rosy, and clearly it brings all of us to a place like this.
Thank you.
And I will say, if the state does come out with their budget before the board approves the preliminary budget on June 5th, we'll make adjustments to that and bring them here. And I also think that you can hear the board and myself, while that's a worst case scenario, that doesn't mean we're going to build off of that, our beliefs of what we might be able to do when we head into negotiations. The board understands that's a worst case scenario, and we probably won't land there. So that's not all taken as truth when they're trying to figure out how to handle negotiations. Is that fair?
Fair.
We can go to the next and keep going and keep this one here. So, I mean, this is a great question. I mean, what are other districts doing? I mean, it's, and I think this is the one that Tom's ready to go.
All right, so in terms of fund balance, districts around us have a comparable fund balance, but districts around us also have bond monies that they are collecting. We have districts around us that are collecting sinking fund monies. And if you've been watching any of the last several board meetings, I've talked about the need for us to get away from major large expenses coming out of our general fund and finding a way for those funds to come somewhere else. And that somewhere else would be a sinking fund. And so, for example, when you look at the budget that we talked about today, the budget that we will probably adopt at the next meeting, a lot of the existing major repairs that are paid out of the general fund could be transferred to a sinking fund. that would require us going in front of the voters and getting a mill, 1 mill or 2 mills for things like buildings and grounds, repairs, improvements, asphalt, roofs, facility refurbishment. Sinking fund dollars can only be used for repair, development, improvement, and purchase of school facilities, property. It can be used for safety, security, building upgrades. I guess what I'm trying to articulate, and Mr. Sislo made me wait until now, because I wanted to say it from the beginning.
Save the
And
best for last.
And I haven't been shy about it. I've been very open about the fact that a number of our expenses are coming out of general fund. Big, large expenditures are coming out of the general fund. So if we can get to a point where the community will support us on a sinking fund to help pay for those things, that will help our fund balance to the extent that we would be able to do more for for others. And so I anticipate the board having this conversation. I have pushed hard for this because I really truly think it's needed. We have aging buildings. We have aging infrastructure. It is not sustainable for the district to continue to pay for these tremendous expenses out of general fund, because we will spend that general fund a lot faster than we had hoped for or planned for. So, you know, the other thing that I want to just share with you too is, you know, just because I am familiar with what's going on in other districts. Other districts have pay to play for folks that play athletics. We don't have that. There are other districts that say, you know what, bring your own device to school. Our district isn't at that point. Our district has had the ability to provide those things to our students. So again, from my perspective, and of course it requires support from the board, I think it's important that we move forward with a sinking fund, and we will need your help to get that over the finish line. My understanding is that I may not be able to do that personally, but I'll do that through my wife. But I think it's really, important. I really do, and I think if we can get some of these big ticket expenses out of the general fund, it's really going to help the district. It's going to help all of you as well.
That's an important thing that Tom just said. You're going to hear sinking fund coming out of this. We're going to bring language forward to put on a ballot and have discussions about that at future board meetings. But what he also said is important, that unfortunately of where we're at, we can't use school resources to say vote yes on these things. We could present an informational campaign that says, we need to replace the, do some track improvements. We need safety improvements, phones, all these things. These are the things that we need, and compel the community to vote yes on that, such that that we can use those dollars elsewhere, and not the general fund. So,
Just to help clarify, and you saw them in the budget, in the amendment, in the last 60 days, I've had $354,000 in needed repairs hit the district. Middle school counseling office chillers, one of the high school chillers. The elevators here at the high school need $18,000 or they're going to have to be shut down, and then we're in violation of safety. It's continuous. And just so you know, when Mr. Sislo says we're going to be bringing a sinking fund to a future board meeting, it's one of the next 2 board meetings. And the intent is in July, they will vote to put it on the ballot this November. And we will start collecting, if it passes, we will start collecting those funds next year. That is a goal. Mr. Sislo and I actually had a phone call this morning with the law firm to get them started in putting the language together of what will be on the ballot. So that's not something down the road. That's something we're doing in the next 2 months. I will tell you today, I went and presented the history of Milan area schools to a group of about 15 seniors at the Senior Citizen Center. And as I talked about the buildings that we have and things, I mentioned that the high school is 20 years old. And they couldn't believe it. They're like, no, it's not. And I'm like, yeah, this building opened in 2004. It's 20 years old. And they're like, they looked at me and I saw the opportunity and I said, and what do you need to do in your house when your house is 20 years old? And they all went, roofs, hot water heaters, furnaces. I said, exactly. And I took that opportunity because they kind of saw it. And I said, look, the district isn't going to be coming to you to build another building. We don't need to do that right now. We have capacity in our buildings. But we do need to think about coming to you to get money to help take care of the facilities we have. And from that group, which it was a small, but it's a senior citizen group, which sometimes cannot always be supportive of taxes, they got it when they thought about our newest building being 20 years old. And so that's going to kind of be the informational stance that I take as I'm working in the community to get a site sinking fund passed. And honestly, the site sinking fund will directly help the general fund because we are paying for these things out of the general fund right now. And other districts that are passing bond proposals every 3 and 4 years, like a lot of them in our county, never have to pay for those things out of the general fund. So I agree. We have the same foundation allowance now as everybody else. There are some other factors that aren't equal, and that's what we need to try and equalize and do some of these things to make them equal.
Any other comments on this slide? This one.
Mr. Sislo, I feel like, and you don't need to go back, Mr. Hoskins. That's really hard for me to say. The decreased enrollment, I understand that very clearly. We talk about that at almost every board meeting. But then looking at the next slide, the staff to teacher ratios, and this number is always so deceiving to me because we know we're not at a 14-to-1 teacher to student ratio. That includes social workers, special education staff, although they do have kids in front of them. And this one's just, as a teacher and administrator, I think sometimes, and I know it's just data that's being brought forward and it's good, but community at large sees this and say there's only 14 kids in a classroom. That's what the greater community sees when we look at this. It's our behavior specialists. It's all of those people who aren't directly in front of a classroom full of students every day. So my worry is how do we right size some things without overloading classes? Because I don't think there's probably a teacher in this room that has 14 students all day long in front of them. Back in 2012, I'm certain there wasn't only 20 kids in a classroom either. And looking at our contractual numbers, I imagine our class sizes are, and I don't know what those numbers off the top of my head, but our contractual numbers say one thing, and I suspect most of our classrooms are close to those numbers. So this isn't about, I just worry that this slide could be deceiving to our community at large. Because again, I know 14-to-1 isn't a realistic number for the number of bodies in a classroom at any given time.
May I reply to that?
Please.
I understand completely what you're saying. As far as the high school and projections for next year, I think there's some interesting questions that you could ask our principal about numbers and teacher ratios and students and that kind of thing, that would be worth information that would be worth your time. I cannot speak to other buildings. I don't have that knowledge, but I know that it is interesting and it's important as it applies to the high school for next year.
Thank you. I appreciate that greatly.
2 things I'll add to that. We are downsizing by 3 gen ed teachers next year, 2 at the high school and 1 at the elementary school. So we are right sizing. A lot of this is also caused by grant funded positions. And if we cut a grant fund position, we give those grant dollars back to the state of Michigan. They can't go into the pool to pay for general fund teachers. So a lot of this came through COVID dollars and grant dollars and those things. So that's part of this reason. But I also agree that right sizing is important, and we are doing some of that next year. We are downsizing the high school staff by 2 and the 5th grade staff by 1. At the elementary level, I've done the numbers. If we downsize by any teacher K5, we will be in violation of the contract. So we're as tight as we can be. The problem right now is we're in some numbers that are low because of the numbers of students we have, and short of doing like a 3-4 split or something, there's no way to balance those numbers. Middle school will be tight next year as we add that grade, and our specials teachers have to do some of the support of those 5th graders. The high school is the place we're focusing on, and right now we are downsizing by 2. And that'll be through attrition. No layoffs.
And may I ask, is that part of our projections for next year when we
Yes,
think about
that's built in
those
this budget.
things?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
The next slide. Any comments here? And the next slide.
If there aren't going to be comments from the board, I would like to specifically address you, Mrs. Gutierrez, when you said what you said. Again, when we looked at this, specifically.
Oh, is your mic still on? It is. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I apologize.
You're right. When we looked at some combination of these numbers as a direction forward, I think we were, thinking the same. Your comments echoing what is going through a lot of our minds. That was worth noting again.
Any comments on this one? Yeah, I think if there's anything, I think we can just sum up back again. I mean, again, this is a difficult conversation, and it's not intended. There's nothing to be intended as gotcha. I mean, I think I want to have this understanding. I mean, you set it off correctly. Is that Mr. Gearbaugh negotiates on behalf of us. There's things that that we understand. There's things that we don't understand, and we try to gain that knowledge as best as possible. I do. The things that I see that hamstring us are those the specific dollars that we're supposed to spend on specific things, and then the lack of a sinking fund to offset those gen ed dollars. Those are 2 of the largest things that I can see that can help the situation as we go forward. So, yeah, Ms. Gutierrez.
To that point, I think that this conversation has illuminated kind of important points on both sides, whereby we all understand that there's not infinite dollars to spend. Yet I really appreciate this presentation, Mr. Hoskins, because I think it has helped me have clarity about what some of the major priorities are, or some of the real glaring places where things can be corrected. I don't think in any one negotiation year find the opportunity to have a windfall and solve every single thing in a district. But what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I just want to reiterate this for myself, what I'm hearing is 2 kind of real data-driven issues is that Mr. Lacrosse gap, or the years of service piece, and I would encourage us to think carefully about that, as well as the lack of increases, scheduled increases between year 11 and year 21, that kind of flattening of the line for those more senior teachers. And beyond, yes, thank you. Yes, thank you for that correction. I should say the lack of kind of an increasing line beyond year 11 in general. Those are the two takeaways I have, and I really appreciate, and correct me if those are not two of the high points, but I appreciate that as a board member to think through what are some real tangible things that we should be thinking about, with the understanding that the resources are limited. There's, never going to be all the money in the world, but what are the improvements that we might be able to make in this year? Thank
Mr.
you.
Sisler?
Yes.
I just wanted to say too, as I go into this fall negotiation, I'm gonna do as much research as I can to make sure I'm as prepared as I can. But if anybody's ever heard me speak before, I recognize longevity. I recognize schools as the community builder. We keep schools strong, we keep families strong, we keep people here. I grew up in a town where I went to school my whole life in the same school district. So having long teachers teachers I can go back to when I graduate high school and they're still there, and I can see them and thank them and say, you're raising the next generation. Or I go back home now, and my dad used to work at the school, and they're there. That's important to me. I think it shows a good, strong community. So I am invested in trying to make our teachers long-term teachers, because they help develop the next generation of not only students but teachers. So I do recognize that, and I will attempt to be as prepared as possible when we come to it.
Thank you, Ms. Pryor. Yeah, Mr. Gearbaum.
I'd just like to ask the board, because I know this isn't the case in other districts and there might be some misconception. I'd like to ask the existing board members who have been here a while, how they feel, how involved they feel they've been in the negotiation process in the past. While I negotiate on your behalf, I think it's important that you talk about your involvement. And I think the newer board members can talk a little bit about that as we're going through some other matters and we've had closed sessions on it, how well educated you are on those issues and both sides of the picture, so that you can give me the proper guidance. I just think it's fair that you speak to that matter, please.
Okay, I was gonna say, I can speak. As coming in, I'm nervous about coming into a situation where I don't know all the information. I'm not a person who likes to step into something and talk about things I don't know about. So if you don't hear me speak, I'm not as confident, because I'm not gonna give you information that I'm not sure about. But I do feel prepared by my board members and Mr. Gearbaum when I come in. I get all the information I can from him, and other resources outside as well. I've attended WISD trainings, so he does provide everything that he can, but I also feel it's important not to just get stuff from him. I know I don't want that to be a slight on him, but if you're only getting it from one source, sometimes we all have unintentional biases, and so I feel it's important to get it from everywhere. But he prepares me as much as possible about everything. I would like to be able to see, so I'm prepared to go in contracts for previous years, so I can see how things have played out before. But I do feel very prepared when I come in. If I have a question, everybody's able to open, so they do give me the information I need.
So I was very involved in the last contract negotiation. I was there, I think, almost every meeting. So I'm familiar with the process. I can say that I feel like I've learned an awful lot in during the COVID era. It was obviously very pleasant for all of us, but I'm very involved with the financials. I repeatedly ask Krista Hendricks for financial statements, variance reports. I will ask for percentage increases, trends. I go through the check runs, I go through the credit cards, I go through all the financial statements, as do other board members. But I'm actively involved, probably to the extent that I drive Krista crazy. And there are times where I reach out to Mr. Gearbaum. There are times where I talk to him on the phone. There are times where I come to the office because there are things that I need to know or understand. So I'm also trying to do a more than adequate job on seeing what other districts are doing and what other districts' fund balances are. So that's my 2 cents.
Others? I'll speak to a little bit about it. When we go into closed sessions for negotiation strategies, Mr. Yearbaugh brings us the information that he has as part of the negotiations. If we have a board member present at those negotiations, the board member will also provide that update as well. So we try to be as transparent as possible in regards to that. The Open Meetings Act is a double-edged sword. It's very important for transparency and for the government, but the only time that these 7 people can really get together and talk is here. I can't call these folks up and say, let's meet on Saturday night and have this conversation about this presentation. It just doesn't happen, and this board takes the Open Meetings Act seriously. So I can understand why, when we have these questions, it can feel that way, but it's just, that's the opportunity when we can do those things because of the Open Meetings Act. If we do have board members that attend negotiations, it'll be no more than 3, because if it is more than 3, we're going to be violating the Open Meetings Act. So if you do notice that, let somebody know, because I don't want to break the law. The other thing is, and it's tough. It's tough in a small community. I mean, in Milan, I look out, I see a teacher that my son rear-ended. I see a neighbor on North Street. I don't look at her, but I see somebody that, she's been, she's been a part of my life for more than 40 years. So, it does mean a lot to us. Mr. Hoskins is a Milan man. I understand that. Mr. Yearbaugh is a Milan man. And there's plenty of Milan women and Milan everything else. And this board hears you, and I understand that it may not feel like it because of the graphs that are presented and such. But I will go back to, you presented something to us prior to the last negotiations, and I appreciate the acknowledgement that we made some adjustments, and I am hopeful. I do, despite the information that we have, that we can move forward and fix some of the things that have been brought forward. So, others?
Mr. Sislo?
Yeah.
I guess the thing I'd like to add, while I have a lot of education experience, I haven't been on this side of the table except for about 1.5 years now, right? I didn't get on the board. I have no personal skin in the game anymore. Both of my daughters graduated many moons ago before anybody else on this board. But we chose Milan over 20 years ago. Our girls were going into 5th and 8th grade, and there's a reason we chose Milan. I was moving into administration in a neighboring district. I could have taken the girls there. This community and this school system in particular matter. Again, I could have taken them someplace else, and I said no, that I wanted them to be here. The education they got was everything I could have hoped for and more. And so while I don't know that we'll be able to fix everything, I'm on this board because I made a promise to Mr. Yearbaugh and to the educators. And when I say educators, I mean everybody. Everybody who draws a paycheck here matters. Our bus drivers are the first and last people many of our kids see. They matter. So I appreciate the presentation. I appreciate the data. It's just going to make us better, and hopefully we'll be able to make some real good gains moving forward.
Mr. Sislo?
Yeah, Ms. Gutierrez.
I appreciate what Mrs. Rosenleeter just said about our commitment to this community. I too was not born a Milan woman. Never heard that term before, but but I grew up in a community much like Milan, and when we were looking for a place to raise our children and educate them, this place felt so much like home, both for the reasons that exist here, but also because it truly did feel like home. I grew up in a community much like this, with one elementary school, one middle school. The kids you started kindergarten with are the kids you graduated high school with, and those are lifelong friendships, both with my classmates and with my former teachers. And so when I had the opportunity to join the board, I did so for two reasons. One, because I wanted to contribute to a community that I have come to care really deeply about. It's, for those of you, of course, know or don't know, my husband's employed here as a para. He loves his job. He loves his coworkers. He loves the kids, but also because I really wanted to learn about what makes a school system tick and how we can really create that. And we create that because of people like you every single day. And so I too, I look out in the audience and I see Mrs. Georgette and Mrs. Miller. I made a list of all of those of you that my kids had as teachers, and I'm just really humbled by how many of you are in the room here and how many of you are still here 2.5 hours after we started this meeting. I don't think that, when I came into this, I expected this to be a presentation, and I did not expect this to be an opening for such a broad conversation. And so I appreciate Mr. Sislo for giving the space for this. And I want you to know that I'm going to go home tonight feeling really optimistic about that this negotiation can be one that is collaborative and collegial, and that you know how much we care about you and that we are members of this community too. And so I appreciate you, Mr. Sislo, for making space for this. I appreciate you, Mr. Hoskins, and all of you for bringing this to us so that we can go home and really think about the most effective next step forward. So thank you. And now I'm a Milan woman.
There you go. You're Milan. Yep. There you. I'll nominate you. The other thing I want to say is in regards to the vote, when we vote on these things, because that's very important to understand as well. Because there's 7 of us. A quorum is 4. So by law, even if somebody's absent, so even with Ms. Heike absent, if we voted on something tonight, it would still have to have 4 yes votes in order for it to pass. So anything that we on something that involves this teacher contract, I want to apologize because 3 of us have to abstain for conflict of interest. So if we were voting on something in regards to the teachers, no matter what, even if 2 of us are absent, it doesn't matter who's here or who's not, because it's a board of 7. We have to have a vote of 4-0 in regards to teacher votes. So I want people to understand that's not a rule that we've made up our own. That's from state law of how a quorum is identified and what we need to follow in regards to that. So I want folks to understand. And then we are allowed to participate in the conversation and the discussion, but we are not allowed to vote. That's written into state law as well. So there's because of the conflict of interest.
I think it's also important to note the board changed their board policy so that all 7 can participate in the discussions. Because up until about 1.5 years ago, the folks with a conflict of interest couldn't participate even in the discussions. And so the board changed their policy. There was a little mixture in our policy of 2 different types of conflict of interest, and it meshed them into one, and therefore they couldn't even participate in the conversation. They can now participate in that conversation and have input and say. And I think it's important to note, I don't bring anything to the table that isn't given to me from the board. I act on their behalf with the guidelines they've given me. It's not me coming to the table and deciding what to offer and what not to offer.
That's the other thing that I did want to say, because that's the other thing that I hear, is that, whatever Mr. Gearbaugh presents is what the board's going to, approve. And,
That'd be a wonderful world to live in.
That does not happen. I mean, when there is discussion, we're a diverse group up here that have various opinions and various experiences. So, this idea of, that we're a rubber stamp board of what Mr. presents to us, I will fully discount. There's no truth to that at all. And I hope you understand that. So, any other comments? Thank you, Mr. Hoskins. Thank you, MEA. I appreciate you guys being here. You are excused. We do have a couple things that we're going to go through, but if you need to leave, I completely understand. Yeah.
It's May-December, hang in there. Yeah, yeah. Thank you all.
Oh, for sure. There was jumping and trying to clap. Oh my God. I was like, I don't even mean it. I would have loved to see it, because some days I'm like, who are you? Seriously, like if I recorded it and sent it to you, it's been like, there he is. There he is. Yeah. It was just, it was so right now, all he wants to be, thanks to you, is a 50s greaser. He needs a whole new wardrobe. He keeps saying all his friends I think I was born in the wrong generation, Mom. Hi, how are you? I'm good, how are you? I'm just working out. No, it's nice to see you too. I give you a hug, yeah, it's like a big table, so, yeah. Have a good night.
All right. Next up on the business is a teacher appointment. I need a motion to approve Danielle Hill as a speech and language pathologist effective for the 24-25 school year.
So moved by Murray.
Support by Rosenleacher.
It's been moved and supported to approve Danielle Hill as a speech and language pathologist effective for the 24-25 school year. Any discussion? Hearing none, it's been moved and supported to approve Danielle Hill as a speech and language pathologist effective for the 24-25 school year. Ms. Murray.
Murray, yes. Pryor,
Yes.
Rosenleacher,
Yes.
Sislo,
Yes.
Farrow,
Yes.
Gutierrez.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Next up, in the area of communications and community engagement, I would like to add a motion to thank Maya Farrow and Avery Powell for their service as school board student representatives.
Moved by Pryor.
Support by Murray.
Notice somebody did not make the motion or support it.
Did I jump on your toes?
No, I don't think so. He was quiet.
You paused long enough.
Yeah,
Give him a
Okay,
chance.
thank you.
So it's been moved and supported to thank Maya Farrow and Avery Powell for their service as school board student representative. Maya, if you could come up here real quick. I do have a certificate to present to you. The official photographer. It says, in recognition of serving the Milan Area School District as a school board student representative for the 23-24 school year, this certificate from the Milan Board of Education recognizes your dedication and proudly thanks you in the name of the community and the Milan Area School District. Thank you so much. Smile. Yes. So, thank you. So it's been moved and supported to thank Maya Farrow and Avery Powell for their service as school board representatives. Ms. Murray.
Pryor,
Yes.
Rosenleacher,
Yes.
Sislo,
Yes.
Farrow,
Yes.
Gutierrez.
Yes.
Murray, yes. Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you, Maya. Now you get to make your last comments as a student board representative.
All right. Upcoming events include a home varsity baseball game tomorrow at 4:30 p.m., a varsity softball try at Chelsea High School on Thursday at 4 p.m., and the girls varsity soccer team will play in the district semifinals at home on Wednesday, May 29th at 5 p.m. Congratulations to the Milan softball team for being Huron League champions, the girls tennis team for placing 4th at the MHSAA regional tournament, and the boys and girls track teams for placing 4th and 7th respectively at the MHSAA regional meet. Lastly, I would like to thank you all for giving me the opportunity to serve as a student board representative over the past 2 years. Thank you.
Well done. Any comments for Ms. Farrell?
Mr. Sislo?
Yes, Ms. Gutierrez.
I I know that I guess we were supposed to do this earlier, but I apologize. Maya, I'd just like to thank you so much for your time here. I know that when you're in high school, there's a million and one things going on. And for you, I think it's probably a million and a million. I know you're so involved, and it's really been a pleasure to get to know you and to even learn more about you as we hear from you on a weekly basis. And so I appreciate your time in being here. I appreciate your willingness to represent your fellow students across the district. And I'm just really grateful. And kudos to your folks, too. This must be a proud mom and dad moment in what is surely a very busy year of proud mom and dad moments. So thank you, and best wishes to you.
Yes, can I go next? Thanks. Yes, super ditto to everything from Ms. Gutierrez. It's been really amazing to have met you as a sixth grader and to have been able to see you serve in this capacity and all of your success throughout the last 6 years since I had you as a student. So I just want to say congratulations on your acceptance to Michigan State, right? Yeah, congratulations, and thank you additionally for all of the time that you've invested in doing this. It's a lot of long nights, and I think you might have been maybe volunteered or perhaps voluntold early on in this position. And so thank you for being willing. Thank you for stepping up for your student body, and thank you for being here with us and lending us your perspective throughout all these years. Thank you.
Mr. Sisler.
Ms. Rosenleisure.
I would just like to thank you also. It was a long time. I think there was a fairly large gap where we didn't have any student representatives. And it was after Mr. Gearbaugh became our superintendent that you added them back. And I'm really proud to say my oldest daughter was one of those first returning student representatives a long time ago. So I'm aging myself and her. You have been incredible. You've been such a leader and support for your fellow students and for this board. And we couldn't be more thrilled. We'll miss you terribly next year. I know that to be true. And I look forward to seeing who attempts to step in and fill those shoes. So congratulations to you. And I just have to kind of end with go green.
I'm not sure about that.
Oh, yes.
Mr. Sisler.
Yes, Ms. Pryor.
I also want to just thank you. I reiterate everybody's comments. I give you lots of credit for being a teenager willing to sit through 2 times a month through talk about finances and budgets, and it may not seem like a big thing now, but a good understanding of that as you get older and as you go into your career will be more beneficial than you think. So thank you for being here and putting up with all of us, and congratulations to you.
Gosh, I have so much to say. I'm just obviously very proud of you, and the person that you are, the person that you're going to be. We're gonna miss you being on the a student. We're gonna miss you as a student rep, and I think you're gonna do great things at Michigan State. And thank you for serving the community as well as you have. So, thank you.
We do need to practice that call and response when you hear go green. So we need to practice that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Maya. Make sure I'm not out of order. Yep, so now I need a motion to enter into closed session pursuant to Section 8(1)B of the Michigan Open Meetings Act and upon the request of the student's parent guardian for the purpose of conducting a hearing to consider the discipline of a student whose identity is known to the board as student 2023-2024-5.
Moved by Farrow.
Support by Gutierrez.
It's been moved and supported to enter into closed session pursuant to Section 8(1)B of the Michigan Open Meetings Act and upon the request of the student's parent guardian for the purpose of conducting a hearing to consider the discipline of a student whose identity is known to the board as student 2324-5. Just so everybody is aware, we do have business after. We'll have a decision on the student discipline, and then we will also have public comments and assistant superintendent comments, and board comments following this closed session. So it has been moved and approved to enter into closed session. Ms. Murray.
Rosenleacher,
Yes.
Sislo,
Yes.
Farrow,
Yes.
Gutierrez,
Yes.
Murray, yes. Pryor,
Yes.
excuse me, motion carries 6-0.
We are going into closed session at 9:44. All right, we're returning into open session at 11:02 p.m. I'm going to provide the following resolution. Whereas the administration has recommended that a student whose identity is known to the board as student 2023-2024-5 be suspended or expelled for assaulting another student at school. School administrators notified the student's parents, guardians of the specific charge, underlined the discipline recommendation, as well as the date, time, and place of the disciplinary hearing. Number 3, pursuant to the request of the student's parents, guardians, and is authorized by the Michigan Open Meetings Act, Section 8.1b, MCL 15.2681b, the disciplinary hearing was conducted in a closed session meeting of the board. Number 4, the hearing afforded the student and the student's representatives an opportunity to respond to the charge and to present pertinent evidence for the board's consideration. 5, the board has carefully considered all of the evidence produced in the student discipline hearing. Now therefore be it resolved that a preponderance of the evidence establishes that on April 24, 2024, the student assaulted another student at school. Based on careful consideration of all the following factors, the board determines that suspension is warranted. The student's age, the student's disciplinary history, whether the student has a disability, the seriousness of the behavior, whether the behavior posed a safety risk, whether restorative practices are a better option, and whether lesser interventions would address the behavior. Number 3, the student is suspended for the remainder of the 2023-2024 school year. Upon return for the 2024-2025 school year, the student agrees to follow a re-entry safety plan as determined by the high school administration that includes, at a minimum, a re-entry meeting, school-based counseling, and continued out-of-school counseling. Number 4, during the time of the suspension, the student may not be on school grounds or attend any functions at the district without prior written approval from an appropriate administrator. Number 5, consistent with the revised school code sections 11A and 13111, the board feels that the interests of the district are served by this resolution. Number 6, administrators are directed and authorized to implement all terms of this resolution and are delegated all necessary authority to do so. Number 7, all resolutions and parts of this resolution, insofar as they conflict with provisions of the resolution may be and the same, are hereby rescinded. I need a motion to suspend. I need a motion to suspend student 2023-2024-5 in accordance with the attached resolution that I just read.
Motion by Rosenleacher.
Support by Pryor.
It's been moved and supported to suspend student 2023-2024-5 in accordance with the resolution that I just read. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, it's been moved and supported to suspend student 2023-2024-5 in accordance with the resolution that I just read. Ms. Murray?
Okay, Sislo,
Yes.
Farrow,
Yes.
Gutierrez,
Yes.
Murray, yes, Pryor,
Yes.
Rosenleacher.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
All right, next up on the agenda, we will continue with communications and community engagement. It's time for public comment. Are there any students who'd like to address the board? Are there any public members who'd like to address the board? Seeing none. Assistant Superintendent comments, Mr. McMahon.
Mr. Sislo, I just have a few comments tonight. I want to recognize Molly Jepson, elementary STEM teacher, for being named one of the 4 state finalists for the 2024 Presidential Awards for Excellence in Math and Science Teaching. It's sponsored by the National Science Foundation. It's a pretty prestigious honor, quite actually. She will get, if she's chosen out of one of the 4, you get a certificate signed by the President of the United States, a $10,000 award, and an all-expense-paid trip to the award ceremony. So we're pulling for her. It's a pretty cool honor and recognition. Second comment I'd like to share with you, I had a chance to attend the Michigan Education Research Association Spring Conference. I go to the fall conference and spring. It's a really good meeting. It's a smaller group. It's a good collection of minds in the area of education. Main takeaways this year were a legislative update from Governor Whitmer's main policy advisor, which was great. I actually had lunch with her. Great person to meet and have a conversation with. Assessment updates from MDE, the actual assessment director is there, and then the accountability director also shows up. He wasn't there this time, but he's usually there. So we hear directly from them. The biggest thing there is they're excited because next year could potentially be the first time they don't have any major adjustments to a test in like the last 10 years. So they're excited about that. And then we get a chance to kind of help them iron out some of the wrinkles in the process this year because they make changes every year. And then we had a session on teacher administrator evaluation language, the adjustments that are coming there. Third comment has got a couple within it, but I just want to let you know we've completed all the state assessments. Also, all the sketchy requests for teacher professional development has been submitted. We submitted 42 hours this year for each teacher that attended, of course, but the state only requires 30, so we go above and beyond there. Those are all submitted, and also all the board reimbursement requests for the MASB trainings have been submitted as well. So
Cool.
that's it for me.
Thank you, Mr. McMahon. Superintendent comments, Mr. Gearbaugh.
Yes, several, but I will make it quick. Due to a family obligation, I was not able to attend the band concert on May 14th. I have heard that it was a wonderful concert. I did the next day speak with some of our veteran band members at the high school, and they truly feel that Mrs. Angstadt, the long-term substitute in for Mrs. Upton, is doing a great job, and we appreciate a substitute going as far as leading a concert. Our Milan boys track team finished 4th, and our Milan girls track team finished 7th at the MHSAA Regional Track and Field Finals. Our Big Reds had a strong showing specifically from their relays, winning 2 regional titles. Yesterday, the Milan varsity softball team traveled to Monroe Jefferson and came away with the outright Huron League championship. The Big Reds win, combined with Airport's loss, secured the title. Milan faces Airport on Wednesday on the road to close out the Huron League season. The Big Reds varsity girls soccer team won their regular season finale against Tecumseh, and the win secured a 5th consecutive season with double-digit wins, which is a great accomplishment. It was a close and competitive MHSAA regional girls tennis tournament where the Big Reds of Milan finished 4th overall out of 11 teams. Tomorrow night at 6:30 p.m., Milan High School students will be celebrating many accomplishments achieved during the 23-24 school year. The Senior Honors Night is a great way to celebrate the successes of our graduates. I invite everyone to attend and see all of the wonderful things that our students are doing and hear about the wonderful things they will be doing over the next few years. Thursday night at 7 p.m., our choir will perform their last concert of the year. I invite everyone to come and enjoy the beautiful music of our choir programs, middle school and high school. Under staff, I too want to congratulate Molly Jeppesen on her prestigious award, and we wish her well in the final round to see if she can be the finalist selected. Just some general updates. The Wellness Committee met on Wednesday, May 15th. The committee is ramping up for their triannual review of our wellness policy. The review has to be completed next school year. Today at 11 a.m., I presented the history of Milan area schools at the Senior Center. I provided a presentation with a lot of pictures of our old buildings. And the presentation actually started with Milan area schools in the 1800s and ended with our Reimagine Milan area schools initiative. I will say that there were at least 5 audience members who graduated from Milan, who helped me fill in some of my blanks on Milan area schools history, and I greatly appreciated that. I asked them before I started the presentation who had graduated from here, so I knew my audience, and they were actually helpful in giving me some history, so I greatly appreciated that interaction today with some of our seniors in the community. We did receive updated calculations from PFM, our financial advisor, regarding our debt millage rate. The rate will remain at 9.75 mils for next year. This is something that the board will be approving at their June 5th meeting. It's also part of the document that will be shared at the June 5th budget hearing. I do want to state that we did make up some ground. Last year's calculations had us paying off our remaining $425,000 in debt in the 2035-2036 school year, with a payment of $11.5 million in 2034-2035. This year's calculation have us paying off the remaining $8.6 million in 34-35. So we backed up 1 year, and that year went from an $11 million payment to an $8 million payment. So while we've seen some gains, it's not quite enough yet to lower our millage rate. Hopefully with one more year of good gains, we will be able to do that. We would have been able to this year, but interest rates on the school bond loan fund increased to the degree where it erased a lot of our increases in our tax collections. So if we can get interest rates to go down and our tax collections to maintain, we will be able to hopefully in the near future lower that millage rate yet again. Over the past 3 weeks, Krista and I have been working on the request for proposal for our food service management company. We currently have a contract with Chartwells, but we are required under state and federal law to bid that contract every 5 years, and this is our 5th year of the contract. The bid process is highly monitored by MDE. Tomorrow I will be, with Mr. McMahon's help, we will be running a mandatory pre-bid meeting. We will then answer any questions that they have. They are to issue their questions by May 22nd. Those questions will be answered the following week. Bids are due by noon on June 7th. Once we get the bids, we have a bid point calculator that we are required to use. We will evaluate all the bids. That determines the low bidder. We then make our recommendation to MDE. MDE approves our recommendation, and then I will bring it to you to vote on and approve on June 7th. Earlier today, President Sislo and I spoke with Jeff Souls from True Law regarding the paperwork needed to put a site sinking fund ballot proposal on the November 2024 ballot. A discussion on this matter will be added to an upcoming board agenda in the very near future. I did meet with Tanner Supply, our door lock upgrades company that you approved a bid for. They have the final orders in. They came and looked at every door, so they know exactly what we need to do. I did receive quotes today. I have not had a chance to open them, but the quotes are going to actually be a little bit less than what you approved because some of those doors are different in nature and don't need to have something done, or will have to have something done, but it's not part of this bid, and we'll loop back around and take care of those. We have some classroom doors that have crash bars and just different things that make it a different situation. The security cameras are now on site, and installation will begin soon. As the board approved the new system, it will be paid for with 2022-2023 state-funded safety dollars and 24-25 state safety dollars and some general fund dollars. That's all that I have.
Thank you, Mr. Gerba. Board member comments?
Mr. Sislo?
Yes, Ms. Gutierrez.
Just a couple of updates. I wanted to congratulate the middle school band and the high school bands on a lovely concert and thank Mrs. Ingstad for her leadership and stepping in over the last semester. There was a Milan Middle School parent information meeting on May 9th. I know Mr. Gearboss stepped in for a while too and posted a picture of how well attended it was. There was a lot of parents there, which was great. I think it's in part because it represents 2 grades, 4th and 5th graders who will now be 5th and 6th graders in the middle school. But to me, it also represented that there might still be some existing questions about the reimagining Milan and the new structure of the middle school as well as the other buildings. And so I just wanted to remind the community that Mrs. Pryor and I, Mrs. Murray, and I will be at Simon's on May 29th for a Big Red Board chat on this very topic. It's at 6:30 at Simon's, and so we look forward to having folks join us for that. Just wanted to also note that Milan Middle School is having their community showcase tomorrow night at the middle school, where many of the students there will be sharing some of their projects and experiences over the last year. And then I just checked, our next board meeting is not until after the graduations that are coming up. And so I'd like to wish congratulations to our many graduates. Our adult ed graduation is on May 28th, and our high school graduation for the students here in the building is on June 2nd. So I know many of us look forward to attending those events. Graduation is always a really joyous time, and I'd like to wish congratulations to all of our graduates.
Thank you, Ms. Gutierrez.
Mr. Sislo?
Yeah, Ms. Breyer.
I only have a couple comments. I wanted to also say congratulations to all the graduates as I go into my last few days as a parent of a child in the district, as my son graduates the second. So I want to say congratulations to them and to the, I also wanted to say congratulations to the boys track and field team, as tonight they won the Huron League Championship, second time in 3 years.
Nice.
They worked really, really hard. It was very, very hot out today. And so just congratulations to them.
Excellent. Others? Mr. Farrell.
I just want to reiterate what everyone said about the middle school and high school band concert. It was great. I did send Mrs. Angstad an email thanking her for stepping into a challenging situation and doing such a great job. I also want to thank the MEA and the teachers for coming to tonight's board meeting and the presentation that they provided us tonight. I think it was very helpful. And also, I just want to thank Krista Hendricks and Brian on all their hard work and efforts, as well as Ryan with regard to the budget amendment and next year's proposed budget. So that's all for me.
Thank you, Mr. Farrell. Any others? You're good? You're finished? Oh, go ahead. You're.
Yeah, just in the interest of time, keeping it super brief, congratulations to every graduate from any program that is part of our family here in Milan area schools. I look forward to attending as many of those celebrations as possible. I also was able to attend the band concert and want to personally extend my thanks and gratitude to Ms. Angstad for stepping in and taking on that difficult situation and doing it with such grace and professionalism. It's clear that our students continued learning and growing in their musicianship, and that's the goal, that's everything. And I also want to commend the students in those classes for their leadership and perseverance through a time that was certainly challenging and, felt very much like loss, for being able to find growth and positivity and gains through that. It was really awesome to see some of our student directors at the high school who are, one of them a graduating senior, stepping up to conduct and fill in. And so I had an opportunity to talk with Ms. Angstad after the concert and just thank her very much for her contributions and efforts. And I think that's it for me tonight.
Excellent. I just want to thank the MEA for attending and for the presentation and the dialogue. We look forward to the negotiations for a new contract. So, any others? All right, drive home safely. We are adjourned at 11:20 p.m.